Finally got that PS5 deep dive.
And there's still things I'm still confused about.
So, but we'll talk about that. Hey, hello and welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, as always, Mr.
Saul Bridges bringing y'all episode
155.
55? That's what I was sitting here thinking.
Yeah, I actually hadn't had to think about it all this week. It's been crazy with everything going on out there. So I guess first thing I'll go ahead and say is I hope everyone's doing all right within all this stuff, and is not freaking out and buying massive loads of toilet paper that they'll probably regret when the economy is bad and they spent all their savings on toilet paper.
Yeah.
But if you are not one of those people, then good on you. Anyway, this is a big week for Sony amidst all this crazy stuff because we finally got something in the way of a big PS5 dump of information, whether it's what you wanted or not. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Starting this show off the right way, it's time to check in on my buddy who I've not seen all week due to work.
Yeah, I was quarantined from work.
For no reason. He doesn't have anything, I should say.
We don't know that.
Yes.
Well, I did have something, but it was not related to what is going on.
Exactly. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I had an upper respiratory infection. And so I was sent home very nicely and made sure I rested all week and with everything going around. But yeah, so this week I haven't played much at all. Surprise, surprise. I did play probably 20 hours of Animal Crossing so far.
Good game for your situation, though. You know
what
I mean?
Like all day Friday, all day yesterday. I played it this morning. I'll probably play it tonight when we get done with all of our errands. So I'm really enjoying that. I love it. If you guys, we already have in our Discord an Animal Crossing chat. I was originally going to use that for fruits, but I actually ended up getting all the fruits through various islands that you can travel to. But if you play the game and you want my friend code, let us know in the comments or on Twitter, anywhere that you may want to play. And if you need some fruits, I got them. I got every single one of them. But
you can be a fruit dealer?
I can be a fruit dealer. But other than that, like I've played Dark Souls remastered on my PS4 yesterday. I started that up just because with what Corey was talking about made me kind of want to go replay it. And then now he's talking about Dark Souls 3, so it's like crap. You know, me and you played Dark Souls 3 at the same time, but also at the same time, we never summoned each other. And I was like, maybe me and Corey can summon each other and have fun like co-op. He's never played through the game before.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so like maybe he could co-op summon me.
The only thing we did on Dark Souls 3 was just because it was interesting for us to try was when I couldn't beat Lothric.
Yeah, and we did
share played in and we took turns trying that. Interesting. You know, that was fun in a weird way. You know, it's kind of, I guess it was cool because the technology was still really new for share play at the time. So it was like, look at this. This is cool.
And it worked fairly well, actually. We've talked about it before.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of just dove into that game. Then, for whatever reason, there's a really good YouTuber named Prod, and he does like Dark Souls, like various Dark Souls videos, like mods and Let's Plays and PvP things. And like, I don't know, like if Google algorithm is just listening to my Discord or what, because yesterday they started recommending me videos of his again, and I'm like, cool, I'll watch some of his videos. I haven't watched them in a while. And then I was like, you know what, now I kind of want to go back and make a Dark Souls 3 PvP character again. So like I'm just kind of all over the place with what I've been playing. None of it except for Animal Crossing for any substantial amount of time. I think I played Dark Souls 1 Remaster for like an hour. Oh, and I did get Octopath Traveler. It is half off on the eShop right now, so $30. I had like $7.
You had it before already, though.
I bought it. Yeah, I got about. Let's see. There's 8 characters. I got 5 characters, I think, or 6 characters in.
I got 4 in, and apparently that's just the beginning of the game.
Yeah. It's that game.
It's very long. I played it for a long time.
I've kind of complained about it, but like the more I look into it, the more that I realize that the overarching story is not meant to be the experience of the game. It's each of these characters' individual stories. The overarching story is just kind of there to tie them all in a way.
Yeah.
And it's not meant to be this grand ordeal Final Fantasy style story. You're supposed to get that collectively from all the characters. So I actually enjoyed every single character story that I got. Because I got Oberyn, I got the Hunter, I can't remember her name, Therion, the Thief, and Cyrus.
And it changes which one you get first based off of who you choose, correct?
I think so. I've only played through the game once with Cyrus. So like I think what it is like they're over leveled if you try to go to get the other ones. Or like not their over level, but it's hard to get to because that area is.
Yeah, essentially, you'd have a hard time getting to them because of the fact that you're not leveled appropriately.
Yeah, and I ended up picking it up for $23 after using some credits for my eShop. So like that was really, really well worth it in my opinion. Because I love that game. I like the art style and the combat and everything.
Truly is gorgeous. I mean, it's interesting playing it and thinking a game. Okay, I should say this. Thinking a game that is sprite based is gorgeous in a very different way than you normally look at sprite based games that you thought were gorgeous. It's because it's got that 3D element of sprite. It's like, something about giving depth and like focal point to sprites really changes the way that it looks.
Now I'm curious how long it takes to beat this game.
I'm assuming 40 hours,
60 hours minimum main story.
Good Lord. Okay,
77.
I played for about 20.
If you want to complete the story plus extras. And then if you want to complete the game to 100%, it's 102 hours. So yeah, that's not bad. But that's also like one of my favorite kind of pick up and play kind of like things, like where the story, since every character story is like an hour and a half to 2 hours long, a little bit less than even an hour and a half on some of them.
Which I grinded and explored a lot. So realistically, I think I played about 15 hours if I had to really put a time on it. The more I look at it now, it's the more I actually really enjoy the way it tells its story, because it's not something I have to be completely focused in on 100%. And that's the perfect kind of couch RPG. So I've been kind of going back into that. I picked it up yesterday, and as a break from Animal Crossing, I got done with Cyrus's character, and that's when I was like, okay, I'm gonna call it quits for now. And we went and got Tacos for Life. So. The thing about RPGs, definitely, classic JRPG style games, that's been interesting is a lot of people want them on PlayStation 4 and Xbox, but it really seems like for the past, probably 8 years, if you've been wanting a classic style Square Enix game, the place to go to get it is a Nintendo console, because it's like Bravely Default was a game that a lot of people loved, and it tapped back into a time of Square Enix games that people really liked, or really, I should say, Square games that people really loved. So tapping back into that is really interesting, and then also going through a little bit later and then getting something more like this. It goes to show that it's almost like, because of the expectation that comes with putting a game on PlayStation and Xbox, because of the graphical fidelity and all that other stuff, that if it's going to be a big AAA release that's $60, people want crazy graphics, real-time combat, and it seems like that expectation falls by the wayside despite the price point when you go to the Nintendo consoles. Because like Bravely Default was a $40 game, as was normal for 3DS, and then this was a full-price $60 game, despite being different in the way that it's set up and played.
I do think, though, that like what I like about these art styles is that they are done very stylistically.
Yeah.
And that it
I didn't play Bravely Default, so I should say I know what it looks like.
Bravely Default 1 was fantastic.
But I didn't play it.
Bravely Default 2, that is now like not canon or something.
What was it called?
Bravely Second.
That's what I thought. And now the new one that's going to be the actual sequel is
called... this is actually called Bravely Default 2, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But yeah, Bravely Second was not great. I picked it up on clearance at Target for like $17, I think, or $20. And I was like, I got like 15 hours in on it. I'm like, okay, no, this is not pulling me in like their first one did. But what have you been playing this week?
I beat Shadow of the Tomb Raider, like I thought about, and I should, last week I think I probably came off a little more negative towards the game than I intended to. I applaud the game for doing different stuff and not trying to be an exact Uncharted clone, and for the fact that the game actually does tend to take on a slightly more mature tone than it does. I mean, and that's in all the walks of it. One of the things in that game that I really like, going back all the way to even the first one, is very gory death mechanics if you fail at platforming challenges. So like if you're doing a platforming thing, a lot of them are even wrought with danger in the real time. So like you'll do downhill mudslides and you'll have to kind of navigate around things, and if you don't, you'll run into things that have like spears in the wall, and you'll see it straight impale her through the neck, which is interesting because it's quite a shift in tone from Uncharted, which very rarely shows that. In Uncharted, if you fail a platforming thing, most of the time you're just going to fall, and you don't really see anything happen. In this one, though, there's a cave where you're going through, and it's a challenge dungeon. You don't even have to do it, that I was doing.
It's a chalice dungeon.
Challenge tomb, I guess is what I should say, the right wording. But, if you fall, in that challenge tomb, there's wolves, and if you're up high on a thing, and eventually you can get down to that level, but if you fall almost like break your leg, and then like you can't get away from the wolves that are all attacking you because you fell and can't really. It's interesting. So you see them essentially eat you.
Yeah.
Which is a lot different than what you give. So I do want to give it shout out, but one of the things I do want to bring up about Uncharted versus that game is that in a video game way, it's great to have that extra added layer of a bunch of exploration, and it does tap into something that I think Uncharted didn't start really getting into until The Lost Legacy, which is that feeling of like, well, if you're talking about a game, it's people who are treasure hunting, but they're never really given the time to explore and find treasures and feel like you're a treasure hunter. You're just living out a story. So it feels much more like a movie, which I know a lot of people like, but there is something fun about tapping into that. And this game does that. But the problem with that is that it's one of those things where when you want to have a narrative that drives a sense of urgency and realism, it's like, oh man, there's a real threat that's coming. And you'll see the dialogue mirror that. There's one part in the game of Shadow of the Tomb Raider where one of the characters says, "We have no time to lose." And then Laura says, yeah, essentially she agrees. And then you start going off. But in the entire way out, you can stop and screw around in so many different tombs and all these different things that are not necessary, but it becomes a dissonance with the main story despite being really fun from a gameplay mechanic. So I guess what I should say is Uncharted, despite being more linear, except for the Lost Legacy, which I think also did it right. It opened it up in one chapter and let you handle the story in the progression order that you wanted to, and gave you a motivation to actually go out and seek these extra treasures that you could pull through on something that was not required, just an extra trinket that let you find treasure easier for the normal treasures that the Uncharted games have had. But Shadow of the Tomb Raider, for as fun as it is, Uncharted does a much better job at getting a sense of urgency and keeping it because of the fact that it's linear. If you can drive somebody to where they need to be going and keep everything paced-wise great because you know that they're going to go here at this time because they can't really go any bigger or any different spots, it helps drive the story a lot better than this one. But still, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is really fun, and I got to give credit to the team over at Crystal Dynamics, Eidos, I think was actually who it was. Crystal Dynamics was originally the one involved. Trying to remember that. Either way, it switched developers, and I was worried that would make for a lesser game. And I actually think this may have been the best Tomb Raider game of the trilogy. So good on them. But past that, I started up Terminator Resistance. It was on sale last weekend for $17, and I was like, you know what? The game looks interesting. I'll give it a chance. And I have been, it's not perfect by any means, but I just beat it last night, platinumed it, and I was blown away by how competent it was. And I mean more than competent. It was really a really solid game if you go into it thinking, this is a AA game, know that you're doing that. But it's a shooter.
Yeah.
And, you know, for some reason, I expected it to be like older style, very linear, just a shooter, kind of like Call of Duty Modern Warfare or something like that.
Is
not
it first
to the quality.
person?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
it's kind of surprising.
It's much more akin when you actually are playing it to Metro Exodus any of the Metro games really. Metro Last Light 2033. It's like if you took a Metro game and kind of smashed it up against Alien Isolation. And I know that sounds weird, but it really
does
works.
Sound weird.
I guess, you know, as somebody who really likes the Terminator franchise, but I'm not just like a super crazy fan or anything, I really like the idea. I love that they decided to go with the Resistance timeline instead of trying to make a Terminator movie that's trying to be in the timeline of one of the movies. Because the problem with the movies is the movies are mostly hinged on the fact of something from the future coming back to the past, and the vagueness of the future is kind of what makes it interesting, because it's like, oh, you don't really know what's happening, but you're just worried about this character interaction between this entity from the future and this person from the current timeline. But what's cool about this is that by actually setting it in the timeline of the Resistance, it makes for a lot more fun of a game, because it's like when you think about what you'd be playing in the Terminator game that would be actually interesting, it'd be loads of Terminators, fighting tons of them, and all the other stuff that comes with that, and fighting peak Skynet. So this is what this game chose to do. And I really thought it was fun. But the problem that the game does have that I'll give is I really like that it's open, And the alien isolation thing that comes into it is definitely in the early game.
Is that because like you're being chased by Terminators or something?
There's multiple ones of them around, and if they see you, they'll come after you, and you can't do anything to them. Early game, you have normal weapons. Normal weapons don't hurt them. You have to wait until you get plasma weapons, and then you got to power those up. And there's a skill tree that you can choose to go through, or it's essentially like an upgrade tree.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to put out more damage. Eventually, by the end of the game, you're able to put them down pretty quickly, which is to the game's benefit and also the game's. It's weird. The alien isolation feeling from the beginning of the game is really tense because you actually don't want to get seen, and it kind of makes you want to do stealth. You get Terminator knives that you can use that are one-time uses that if you sneak up behind a Terminator, you can stab them in the back and it'll decommission them essentially. But I like that aspect, and I like the more open aspect of trying to be more than just a normal shooter. Like, hey, we're going to open it up and do something where there's resource gathering, and there's crafting, and there's actually something that you can use to skill level up. There's lock picking, there's hacking, there's all these other things that try to be more than just a normal shooter, and it succeeds in various different degrees on them. I guess if anything, I'd have to say that the game just doesn't. It's like it has all these features, but it doesn't necessarily justify all of them enough to feel like, well, even though it was in there and it was interesting that they were in there, they weren't really fully realized. So like crafting is in there and gathering supplies is in there, but unlike The Last of Us, where you're constantly having to look and be like, okay, I'm doing this because I have to scrounge to find ammo and to find these things to pull these items together to survive. In this game, if you look around enough, you can just find the items already built up that you can just get. You can find the ammo. It'd be different if to get ammo, you never got it from random ammo crates, but instead you always had to make sure that you were exploring to find these things so that when you got to a crafting table, you could make your ammo so that you could continue to do well. But same thing with like explosives. You could just find explosives. But if you had me finding the explosive materials, which you do find in the game and can use to make your own things, but if you made it to where I never found any explosives and instead always had to craft them, it would have made the crafting system feel more justified. I find that I didn't really use it much.
It's kind of weird there's a crafting system in the game to begin with.
Like it works and it makes sense from like the trying to tie into the world situation of scavengers in the future who go out and scavenge and find stuff and trying to hide from the Terminators.
And what was this game called to the full name?
Terminator Resistance. Crazily enough, me and Blake were talking, the physical version of the game has reached ridiculous heights because it was a limited press. But it was a really fun game. Decently solid graphics and gameplay. Kind of as a AA game, it kind of taps into something that you'd expect to see from like early generation, but fun and competent enough. But yeah, it's interesting the way they chose to go with a lot of this. Now, what is cool is there's some RPG-like elements and some decision elements where you can get characters, you can talk to them and ask about their stories and respond to them and do things that will make them trust you or not trust you. And that does later in the game hinge on a decision that they may make. And there's also 2 different relationship people that you can follow, and you can actually romance both of them if you choose to do so, interestingly enough. But again, some of it goes too close to almost just being like scratching the surface to say it was in the game, and some of it's in the game but not as much, or it's not pushed by the game to make you want to use it enough. There's storefronts in the game, right? But I never needed to buy anything ever. So it's like, well, why is the story even in the game if I was able to get all this? And you could pick up any weapon. So, or for the most part, if you killed a Terminator and you saw their gun drop on the ground, you could hold it and pick it up in your inventory. And the inventory system is kind of like Resident Evil, where you have a backpack and there's only so much space, and you can upgrade that space, but eventually you'll run out of it. So you can pick up guns at the cost of inventory space and go back and sell them, but you don't ever really need to because you never need to buy anything. So it feels like, again, they scratched the surface in a lot of areas. But didn't go deep enough. I would love to see them do a sequel. One of the things I really liked that they chose to do here is that they actually chose to show you John Connors and explain and lead into something that ties into the overarching universe. So that was cool. I definitely say if you can grab it on sale or even at full price, I actually think it's worth the money. But I'd love to see them do even more than what they did with this in a follow-up. And good on them. The developers Teyon Games, Teyon, if I'm not mistaken. And they've made a lot of licensed games, but this was a really competent, really good licensed game, and I shout out to them. I've enjoyed it a lot. But that's all I've been playing this week. I just got the platinum on it, and I intend to either go to Wolfenstein 2 next, or to go ahead and play the Frozen Wilds while it's still included for free on PS Now.
Okay.
So I'll do one of those 2. So I know that was long-winded, but I really like the game, and I definitely suggest that people who have any interest in it look at some gameplay, see if it kind of fits you, and then try it out. There's no difficulty trophies if that's something you're worried about. It's a pretty easy platinum, but fun. If you want the game to actually be challenging, I'd play on hard. I played on normal because I didn't know that, and you can't change it. I would say if you want a challenge, play on hard. It's going to really ramp that up. And maybe playing on hard will make all the other systems make more sense. Like maybe I would have needed to buy ammo or craft ammo myself if my ammo was going less far than it did in normal difficulty. You know? We'll see.
Yeah.
Either way, I guess it's time to go ahead and hop into the community stake.
Sure. Last week we asked you guys, how would you feel if Sony were to extend Dreams beyond the PlayStation platform and put it up on other consoles, even PC? And we got a lot of cool, interesting takes from you guys. Do you have one ready, Bert, or would you like me to go first?
I got one. Over in our Discord, our patron and good friend Josh Ayers, he says, Dreams, like the PS5 audio Dream, is a long-term project, and being on other platforms wouldn't hurt it too much if they intend for it to be a platform. It's not a question of if it will come to PC, but when. Like a few weeks ago, if it's years later, I don't think it's a bad thing to put it out on PC. So I think this ties back into something we were talking about before with how do you feel about Horizon coming to PC. That was one of the community's take questions, and a lot of people didn't really mind it, and a lot of them kind of said, hey, you know, if it's years out, and that's fine. I guess my thing that I'll say in direct response to this, and I think Saul probably agrees, is I am in the same boat as many of you on Horizon being on PC years later. I don't think it affects PlayStation's bottom line in any way. If anything, it gives them more money, and it introduces people to stuff that may want them to actually buy a PlayStation so they can get it day one. In this case, Dreams is such a unique outlier of an exclusive, and it's almost not even a game as much as it's a way to create games. So I would see Sony getting more out of this game, definitely considering how delayed it was, if they went ahead and pushed it onto as many platforms as possible. Now, there is some work with that because Switch would be really cool, but I doubt that every creation could work on Switch. You'd have to find it'd make it really harder because they'd have to go in and make it to where every creation could also be scaled down if needed to be played on lesser hardware.
Yeah. That would be interesting.
But I don't think that there's any reason that Dreams, because of the unique situation that it finds itself in, less of a game, more of a tool, I think that this is one of the few times where I think Sony could have day and date put this out on some stuff, and they would have also seen a better return of investment on a game that took upwards of about 10 years to make.
Yeah. And I do think that it'd be interesting to have a game like that on Switch, which would mean that if that means Mario won't get striked like it is now.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
We all knew that was coming, but yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, it was not a problem they had to face a lot on the Little Big Planet games. But the Little Big Planet games were never able to completely make a game that felt as Mario-like as this does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But either way, I guess, you know what I love about the idea of this being on Switch is? Switch is a really kid-friendly console, and a lot of kids are playing on it. And if you would put this game on Switch, you would motivate and give a really cool way for kids to find an engaging and fun way to start thinking about making games for a living. And in a way, you'd be finding a way to easier tap into the next generation of potential game creators.
Kind of like what Mario Maker does in a way. Like,
yeah.
you see kids making levels on there. This would be like an advanced
And
version.
I think Little Big Planet was that too. I would be sure.
Well, I was talking
right
about
now,
something specifically on Nintendo.
Yeah. But I'm saying even tapping into that genre, good on Media Molecule to have already done that to some extent, because I think that I would bet that there are people who are getting into game development right now who only got into it, or who are developing games right now, who got into it specifically because they just fell in love with Little Big Planet's level creator. So definitely a possibility. You got one over on Twitter?
Yes, I do. Our good buddy, No Fate. Sorry about my throat. He says, more the merrier. I think Dreams needs to be marketed less of a game and more of a game maker. I don't think it should be ever discounted. In fact, I would say raise the price as more games, content, or tools get added. Being an early adopter will then be a benefit for once. I don't know if I agree on the price. Maybe. The only reason I say that is because eventually games in this, people are wanting to monetize themselves, so that if you have to pay $80 for Dreams and then $30 to buy a game off of there.
Well, okay, that would be the thing is I think that eventually the ideal situation to combat what you're talking about would be to make it to where you can buy games made within Dreams without having to own Dreams. So essentially... I
don't think you'll ever be able to do that, though.
Well, the reason I bring that up is, you remember RPG Maker, MX, whatever?
Yeah.
What they were doing is instead of you having to own, like originally, if you wanted to play a game from in there, you had to own it, right? Or you could send it out. But now on PlayStation, even whenever the game does eventually come out, I don't think it's come out. What they've discussed is having a separate app that you download that actually is just hey, when people make their games, they can publish them out to this app, and you can play these games without having to own
now, if that's
the maker. So that's what I would imagine. If Dreams is ever going to move to the idea of being a platform like that, that would be the ideal way to do it.
Yeah.
Hey, here's a separate thing that essentially installs Dreams on your thing, but you can't make your own games within Dreams and fool around. But instead, what you can do is that you can buy games from Dreams here.
Yeah, I think that would honestly, like, if you did that and you added a new suite of tools to it, then that could actually warrant the price going up to like $60.
If people could buy your game without having to also buy the game.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. If they implement what you're talking about. Loki from Twitter, he also says it would be ecstatic if it comes to PC, he says it would be, I think he means I would be ecstatic if it comes to PC. It would open up endless possibilities for game creation and inspire game creators to realize their ideas. And now, while true, like we talked about this before, technically on PC they already have other means to make games, but this is a very simple way to do so. So it would just allow that many more people to be able to do so. So I think that there's tons of games. Like Steam actually is like a kind of a cool outlet in a way where you can buy these AAA games on there and AA games, but there's also fan-made games on there and really cool games. And I actually was talking to Brett, looking at games on Dreams reminded me of when we pitched in and bought a Ouya together when it first came out and was immediately clearance to like $20.
It wasn't immediately, but I mean, it was probably within 3 months.
Yeah, it was within.
It was pretty quick.
The first year.
Yeah, it wasn't $20. I think they were originally going to be like 100 something. I think it was 59, and that was it was 59 for the one we got, which was the Black Developer Edition.
I don't remember pitching in $30 for that.
I don't even remember if I'm being. I don't remember. I think what it was is that we were both going to buy our own Ouyas. I don't know that you pitched in for the one that I had as much as I think we were both going to buy our own so that we could fiddle with developing on it.
Yeah.
And then we just never got around to it because that was also around the time that Kyrie came and we realized that we wanted to do more something like this.
Yeah. And we played that thing for like 3 hours that night we got it. And it was just tons of shovelware on there that was funny. Yeah. And then
the Frog open world game. Man, I don't remember what it was called.
Grand Theft Frog or whatever.
Yeah. Ooh. Grand Theft Frogo.
Grand Theft Frogo.
I know that's not what it was. It was something like, I think it was some alliteration, wasn't it? Like something the frog, like Frank the Frog.
Actually, that actually does sound kind of close. Yeah, like a name and then the frog. It was this crazy, very glitchy game of just a frog. Like, weren't you able to like jump like hundreds of feet high too?
I think so.
And like just scale buildings.
Yeah, but again, it was something that was quickly, stupidly made, and but it was funny, and it showed it was probably somebody's first foray into making a game and seeing what they could do. So, I think my thing I love about Dreams is that you're right, Saul, in that of course on PC, other things exist. And I think I may have said this last week, but it's just like Dreams is a way to lower the barrier. So like I think Loki is who you just said was doing it.
Yeah.
Loki said that it allows more people to realize their vision. I think what it comes down to is that Dreams is a great way to lower the barrier in such a way that almost anyone who's willing to just put a little bit of time in could create anything. So what happens there is games that you would have otherwise never seen because they were in one person's head who had no way of actually putting that out in a way that could be conceivable and playable as a game. Now they have the ability that if they have the drive, they more or less have the way to make, if not the whole game, a playable teaser that essentially shows what their game was. And then from there, they could get potential interest to go, hey, we'd love to make this into an actual game. And maybe other collaborators will be like, we'd love to help you. And now we make little indie Dreams studios that are essentially 3 or 4 creators that are all working to make one game because they really like this guy's idea and mindset, but maybe they're better at modeling. And maybe this other guy understands a little bit more about the player logic. So I think it does help bring people together and helps them focus on their strengths in a way that's so much more palatable to them and like understandable that they can just sit there and really come together and make something cool.
I got one more. We got on, bless you. We got on Twitter, and then we can go on to Facebook because I like Facebook. I don't have Facebook, so I like all this new stuff. But Matt Green says, as long as the content is cross-platform, then it would be a good idea so that other gaming communities can input their creativity into what would be otherwise be lost. But I don't think any game should be truly exclusive to a machine. Maybe have rights for a year, then go to another system. At least that way they benefit from another cash flow when the exclusive deal runs out. And the second part of that tweet is pretty much what I believe, but he does make a very good point about it being cross-platform. It would be cool, maybe somewhat. See, this is like where I leave Switch out of this in like terms of like Xbox, PC, PlayStation. I don't put Switch in that bubble because it adds a lot of weird things with it. But yeah, like if you put this game on Xbox and then PC and say 1 year, there's going to be a year's worth of games that they can try for free, get inspired by, create their own games, and then that just puts games back on PlayStation that hasn't had a lot of content for a year because it's been out for a year, so it puts a new it's like the cycle.
Yeah.
And so that makes sense, Matt. I actually that's pretty nail on the head there.
And wouldn't that go back to what I was just talking about too? It'd be cool if there's one person who's really creative that happens to prefer Xbox, one person who's really creative in a different way that happens to prefer PlayStation. If you could also make it to where not only is all content cross-platform, but creation of content is cross-platform, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, what was really cool about Little Big Planet is that you could have, and I don't know if Dreams is here yet. I think the way that people are working together in Dreams is that they're making creations on their own and then sending it to one person to put into a master level, because you can do that. So I think what's going on there, what I really hope to see in the long run, I think that they've talked about it, if it's not already in the books. Little Big Planet had the ability for you to have multiple people in one world creating that level at once, so that you could have somebody who understood the weird gimmicks, but you were better at making the shapes and whatnot with the creations, work together at once. And that could happen not only couch co-op wise, you could do it over the internet. So you and someone from halfway across the world could work together to make your own level. Me and Seth made our own World War II shooter level. It was really fun.
I think I remember y'all talking about that back then.
And it had a sepia tone, and we had a gun, and you could use the gun to shoot tanks, and the tanks had a little brain that you could shoot on them.
Maybe I'm just thinking like a mini clips game, because that sounds like a mini clips game.
It does, and it kind of played like one. And it was really fun. We spent like 2 hours making it to where the house that you start in a house, and the camera pans out and you see the level and it snaps back, and you get a little text bubble that's like, oh, they're on our position, a missile's coming, and then you can run down the house, and you don't see it, of course, but behind where the little doorway was and a little wall that could hide this was a pressure switch that once you ran over it, it would cause explosives within the house to go off, and it would just essentially break the house down.
That's cool.
And then you could keep going. And again, it's not that it was exceptionally well done, but it was well enough done that it kind of felt like super rewarding, in the sense of like both me and Seth were like, we did it. We figured out how to make the house blow up and go on, and then we figured out how to make the gun work. And we spent about 2 weekends making this little level of a World War II shooter that was competent. You know, I mean, it was fun enough. And anyway, where I was going with that is that would be the really cool thing about cross-platform, is the ability to go in and actually have it to where creators across different mindsets can come through with their own thing and go, hey, you know what? I'm on PC and I'm used to liking these style of games that you maybe don't see very often, but this system is totally capable of making this type of game that you don't see very often. You know, you don't see real-time strategy very often on consoles, right?
Yeah, it's very rare.
Right? So if you're able to get somebody on PC and a guy on console who goes, you know, I'd love to make a real-time strategy game, and then the guy on PC comes in and they work together, you could start seeing genres pop up on console that you don't see very often because of that.
Yeah,
That'd
like
be
a
really
Command
cool.
and Conquer-esque game to finally come back out.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Nice.
One thing about what he said that is interesting, though, I always like bringing this up because I think it's somewhat important to at least understand, I think, why they happen. He mentions that he doesn't think any game should ever be truly exclusive. And I think that most of us have talked that to some extent we're open to that idea down the line, because I like that he said he doesn't think anything should be exclusive, but that it should at least have an exclusivity window on there. Because realistically, if I'm coming out, and this is something that we're going to talk a little bit more on when we start talking about the PS5's deep dive and how this is going to really be a point of contention. We'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, but I have a feeling that games made exclusively for one console moving forward are probably going to be closer to being, at least from the Sony side for sure, more of an impossibility to go to Xbox, and then at least more of a challenge to get them working on PC correctly. But we'll talk about that and what I mean by that.
I would say a challenge on PC, somewhat impossibility, potentially. It
on
could,
Xbox.
it could also
and again,
be,
we have to see.
It could be developed in a sense that like the PlayStation 5 could use this tech, but when you have it on another system, it
doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
that's how I'm going to assume certain.
We'll talk about that later, and that's actually an exciting thing. I know that sounds weird to some, but there's a reason that I'm excited for that. But as for this, going back to just the idea of exclusivity and putting it on a console, I think that I definitely, and we all agree, definitely me and Saul, and then some other of our listeners agree that it coming later to another console just for an extra revenue stream is fine. But I always talk about the fact that exclusives are a really important thing for one reason to me.
Competition.
Exclusives are there for mainly competition, and it drives people to make games that are at such a caliber that you rarely, not never, but you rarely see third parties hit.
I do think, though, this is a whole other rabbit hole. We won't jump down, but I do think, though, a year is a suitable enough time.
My personal thing would be 2 years, because the reason I say that is, when have you reached sales saturation on your platform? And the reason I bring that up is because you look at it from Sony funded this. Sony pulls the teams together. They make it. They allowed them the flexibility to make this really interesting game so that it could be a showcase for their console. And the first year, the price normally, it's getting better, but the price normally doesn't drop crazily. But Sony has gotten a lot better about that. Within 2 years, you can get God of War at $20.
So it wasn't even 2 years.
It wasn't even a full 2 years. Exactly. It was like a year and a half.
I don't think it was a year.
No, it was over a year, but it was a year and 3 months or a year and a half.
Well, within a year, it was $40 new.
Yes, which is great. And Days Gone was also $40 within a year. It went, or I think it maybe even went to $30. I think
it went to $29
during the State of Play thing.
Oh no, you're right. So. Yeah. I forgot about that.
So anyway, what I'm getting with that is within 3 years, 3 years being the window we saw with Horizon, most people on your console will have bought it. So and will have bought potentially, definitely within that first year, would have bought the console to play the game if they really wanted it that bad. So you get the benefit, you give it to your people, and you reach sales saturation that you can realistically get to where moving forward from this point on 2 to 3 years, most of the sales you're going to get are just going to be when you put the game on steep discount during a sale period, or when you give it out for like something like PS Plus. So to me, a good move forward for that ideology would be two things. And I think that this would still offer an opportunity for Sony to have a reason to do this. So let's say that 2 years, right? Within 2 years, Sony goes, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to put the game on PC and Xbox, or PC only, depending on which one they choose to do. Let's just say PC for now, because that at least is something they've done. So we're going to put the game on PC. It's another avenue, but at the same day that we're putting it on PC, now that the game has more or least reached sales saturation for people who are going to try and buy it, we're also going to make the game a PS Plus game. And that's how the cycle works. Hey, if you want to play it on for free, you can play it on PC. Or you can come get a PS4 and get it on PS4 or whatever, and then on PC, if you want to, because you don't want to have to get a PlayStation, you can pay $40 for it again. It brings the max price of the game back up, not necessarily to full price, though they could do that, but it brings it up more than they were selling it for on PlayStation. But now that they're giving it for PS4 for free, they kind of offset each other, but also give Sony a ace in the hole of, well, if you play it on PlayStation right now, you can play it for free. So that's kind of an interesting way to do it. We got one more that I want to do off of Facebook over here. Mr. Michael Potter Schneider says, I think everything should be cross-platform. By allowing access to IP across platforms, we can reduce unnecessary waste, and gaming can make a more positive environmental impact. Now, that's interesting. I think what he's saying is instead of having to make 3 retail versions of one game, that you instead make one retail version of one game that can play on all 3 platforms. Now, in a utopian world, that's a fantastic idea. I'm unsure of...
PC won't utilize that.
It'd be so hard because most PCs don't even have drives anymore.
No, yeah. It's very rare to build a PC in this day and age and put a Blu-ray drive
in. I guess the way to really run your thing home, Michael, would be a all-digital world, which, I mean, personally...
Not even all-digital world, just digital copies for the other 2 consoles.
Well, true, but I guess an all-digital world would get rid of the environmental impact at all. If you make everything digital... Well, I'm not going to say completely gone, because, of course, the internet and the electricity used and all that stuff has an environmental environmental impact, but at least on the plastic and whatnot used, you can cut down on it. And then it would also make it to where if it's just about if you buy one digital license, that it also extends you that digital license on your other 2 platforms. That's the closest way you can get to it. And that would definitely be interesting. I don't know that the problem exists that if you buy the game digitally on each storefront, the only thing that's really costing you is just more money. I mean, it says there's no further environmental impact, because if you're buying it on each one, it's no different than you just buying it on one and then having to download it on the other 2. Most of what you're expending is that. But it's an interesting idea. I think every day we see more and more people kind of bucking the idea of the traditional console market in the way that it's always worked. And I'm wondering how much that's going to affect Sony, because Sony clearly, as we'll talk about in a minute, they really like the idea of sticking to, at least in some way, probably a modified version from what we're seeing, but some way to the traditional console business.
Yeah.
So
I don't think, I always said all digital will be in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't think it's going to be any closer than that.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I probably would have agreed with you that it'd be closer to 5 years if Sony and Microsoft both would have come out and said that our systems will not have disk drives.
Yeah, and
if they would have come out and said that, I would have been like, okay, yeah, the digital future's
and that's another bubble
being forced.
You don't lump Nintendo in. They don't use discs; they use cartridges.
Sure,
which a whole nother thing.
Now that one's a little different. The reason I think that is because when you have something that's completely portable, there's going to be the chance that you're at a place wanting to play a game, and you could go in and buy the cartridge and go ahead and play it day one right there, without the need for internet. So when you're doing something that's so portable that doesn't all have a native, like your cell phone does, have a native thing, but then you have to deal with data plans and restrictions and whatnot. I think cartridges make a lot more sense to tap into. So who knows? But that's the last one, and we're going to go ahead and move over into the
let's shoot through these news topics. Shoot
all
about
right,
like
so
dollar bills.
Pretty good. It's going to be pretty easy. I think Sony really kind of ran the meal. Of course, for this week with the PlayStation Deep Dive and with everything else happening with the virus going on, I think that there was just bound to not be too much news. So the first thing is something that Saul actually kind of scratched the surface on earlier when we were talking about Dreams. He says, in no surprise at all, Nintendo, who are known for being incredibly strict about the use of its IP in non-profit or fan-created games and the like, are pressuring Sony to remove creations within Dreams that use its IP. Some creators have reportedly been contacted by Sony's legal department, but whether this will result in the creations being pulled and what Nintendo can actually do legally remain to be seen.
That's fake, by the way. The second thing, you mean delete that out? That's been confirmed false.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay,
I didn't know if it's. I don't know. Here's what I say. How do rumors get confirmed false? We can go ahead and talk about it because
it's part of the same leak, the spec leak. Remember when the leaks were the specs for the PS5 were leaked, and then it's not complete what it is at all. It was part of that same leak.
Really, it seemed like this would be piggybacking off. Well, we'll go ahead and talk about it, so at least people know what we're talking about.
We all knew Nintendo was going to do that thing with Mario,
right? But again, only interesting that we never saw them quite do it with Little Big Planet, despite people making pretty competent Little Big Planet 2D Mario games.
It might be because Little Big Planet wasn't touted as a game creator.
Maybe. Who knows?
And that's why some people are buying Dreams is specifically for those games, whereas Little Big Planet was more about the platforming, and then that was kind of the side of the game.
Anyway, what we're talking about right here is on the crazy rumor mill. This actually ties into what we were talking about last week with Sony working with Konami on bringing back Silent Hill in some capacity. There are rumors now that claim that Sony is seeking to outright acquire Metal Gear Solid, Castlevania, and Silent Hill from Konami. This seems to be, at least to me, piggybacking off of last week's already shaky rumors, though I did not actually go to what I think was a 4chan post.
So there's a leak of specs. There was this leak, and there was another leak. Or I don't even want to say leak. These are all fake. But it was all part of the same
insider information
thing.
Posts.
Yeah, it was all part of the same guy's thing. And of course, there was the backwards compatibility. That the PS5 will support all 3 systems with 4 on top of it. And
of course, right now,
we don't know. We're getting into this we're getting into this in a minute because I'm still so confused on what. Anyways, it's just fake. Like that's just once again that's somebody. every time that consoles have like this thing up here, you always have somebody who's a mega fan on one side and somebody's a mega fan on the other, and they're quote unquote leaking things so that one console seems better. Now that's not to say that this might not ever happen, but this specific instance of this being talked about is not true.
Well, my thing about why I really don't believe it, and I consider it so shaky.
Well, the whole dream team with all the Castlevania classics and people coming back, or not,
or Silent Hill. It ties right into that same basic idea. The reason I think stuff like this happens is I think that, like you talk about, this is things that people really want to be true, and I think a lot of gamers look at series that have been so long running, like Metal Gear Solid, Castlevania, and Silent Hill, and of course Konami, who's doing nothing in video games. So this comes from a lot of different things, right? People who want to see these games come back, people who want to see them come back in their greatness, and a lot of people view these series at their they view these series to have peaked during their PS1 or early PS2 days. Yeah. So when you look at this, and that means that these games are so tied with Sony at that point. Most people look at the perfect period of Metal Gear Solid being somewhere between Metal Gear Solid 1 and 4. I think a lot of people really land on 3.
Yeah, I was going to say 3 in both forms of Subsistence and Snake
Eater. Yeah. I think a lot of people look at that, and then when you look at Castlevania, most people's perfection of Castlevania is Symphony of the Night. Most people, when they think Symphony of the Night, you think PS1.
It's weird, though, because for me...
Silent Hill 2 is the big one, and that was a PS2 release, right?
Yes, so, but the funny thing is that Castlevania, for me, is actually Nintendo and PS1, because Nintendo DS had Dawn of Sorrow. And that was a fantastic Castlevania game. That was the one where
I never played that one. I know what you're talking about.
You played as Soma Cruz, and his thing was that every time you beat a boss, you get down to its last HP, you have to draw a seal on the touchscreen. You have to trace out a seal to seal it away. And if you mess up, the boss doesn't die. It was really cool. And
that's
really
actually
fun.
One of those really good uses of a system.
And it was
gimmick.
It was really stylish of a game. A lot of people did not like it. I loved. Let me make sure it is.
Dawn of Sorrow. That's definitely one of the names. Whether that's the game you're talking
about. There's Aria
of
Sorrow too, but it's Dawn of Sorrow, and it was so cool with the way like you had to like draw like the thing on it, and sadly this game can't really be remade. Like I guess technically you could, but like you had to like trace out it. It'll have like it'll do it for you real quick, and then you'd like Simon Says it and do it in the exact same order.
It's like a rune. Okay, yeah, you're drawing the rune sigil
to seal it away. Yeah, it was super fun. But yeah, it was so stylish.
But I think that's of course why this is happening. These are people that want these games to come back, and realistically, Konami's doing nothing with them. Now, here's the biggest thing. I don't know why I don't know why Konami would outright sell the IP to Sony when they could do exactly what they're doing now, not make the games themselves, but license them out to Sony, who could choose to do them exclusively for the PS4. And pay for them and everything.
Well, and they could be using the IPs in weird ways too that Americans aren't really normal. Like there could be Castlevania arcade games in Japan that are made by Konami and stuff.
Okay, so what's actually happening is their pachinko machines.
Well, no, I know what
they're
those,
using, and they're themed.
So
they're using the IP in a themed way.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about,
but they're not
developing.
Yeah, they're not developing any games within this that are actual traditional video games.
Which is
so they're using the IP for the money that it can draw in from that, and of course that's popular, and they make plenty of money off of it, more than enough, and that's also why you don't really see them rolling around. But for Konami to not have to do any more work, license the games to Sony, and then let Sony handle all the brunt lifting, marketing, and everything just so they can have the game, that's a possibility. I'm still not saying that's what's happening, but it seems like what Konami would aim to do before just outright selling their IP. Because if they sell the IP, then they can't use it on their pachinko machines, and potentially their pachinko.
Well, they have to lose all
business.
those. Once you sell that IP, you can no longer make money off that IP. Therefore, if there are any existing, that's just the whole thing of like why this won't come in the way that it's being made now.
Yes. Now, whether or not we see Sony really try and tap in, what I'm looking at is, that Microsoft is doing their, hey, you get to play all generations of Microsoft, and this is how we're showing our lineage and our history, right? Is through backwards compatibility, the way they've been able to smartly set it up. And I got to give them props for that. Even the Series X is going to be able to play everything going back to the original Xbox One classics that they have. Sony, I really hope, get to pull this off, but there is every chance in the world that the PlayStation 5 is only backwards compatible insofar as PlayStation 4. Again, we'll dive deeper into that in a minute. But with that said, if Sony is finding some weird inability to do these, which seems impossible to me, what they may be choosing to do otherwise is to tap into that fan base and that history by making new versions or remakes of some of the old games that were always synonymous with something.
You could make a Donasaro remake using the touchpad on the PS5 controller. Yep. It has to be like really basic runes, but like you could like draw like a circle with a line through it or something on your touchpad.
Which was still cool because it does add a layer of like, well, not only did I just whoop the boss's ass,
but I see
now.
Like, yeah, that's what made that game so cool. Like, I loved it.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
My second favorite Castlevania game. Y'all could bite me if you don't agree.
Anyway, so yeah, but whether we see something come from that, it's hard to say. Thinking back to the PS1 though, as we just were, another PS1 era game is making a comeback in this age of classics coming back in the way of Shadow Man Remastered. Originally developed by Acclaim Studios, this remaster will be developed by Night Dive Studios, who already have some experience with the franchise in republishing the original version of the game to PC back in 2014. The remaster is aiming for 4K widescreen support, dynamic shadows, dynamic lighting, HDR, and a lot more modern gaming expectations and features. So, of course, controller support and all these different things. This is interesting. I've never played the game. The art looked really interesting to me. But apparently it's something that's kind of like a superhero-based game. So whether or not I'll get around to playing this, who knows? Seeing the announcement, one of our listeners and friends, Liam, is the one who posted about it. And it made me go and check it out. And I was surprised by what I saw. So whether or not we see that come back in a glorious fashion or not will be interesting. But hopefully that does well for them, because there's something about... I was watching a video the other day, and they were talking about old games they loved. And somebody said, hey, you know, if this game, of course, like all these other games, are coming back in some kind of glorious remastered, remade fashion, and that if you're... beloved game from the PS1 or older is not getting a remake or a remaster, that's probably just not going to happen. Because I mean, I get it. With as much stuff as going on right now, if it hasn't happened yet, the chances seem like they're getting lower and lower. But I guess you never know when a game like Shadow Man, that I've never even heard of, has a way to come back. Anything is possible. Next up, and I don't know if you got a chance to check this out.
Oh, I did. I love it.
It looks so good. Hello Games teased their first title since the launch of No Man's Sky back at the Game Awards 2018, and now we have a new trailer alongside a release window for
The Last Campfire. You didn't throw that name in there in the art in your write out, so I was like, is this Last Campfire? Or is this something different? I was like, no, this is Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the game follows Ember, who is trapped in a strange land in search of a way home. Expect the game this summer. If you check it out, it looks really cute, and I mean that in a charming cuteness. It looks like it's really heartful. And in the PS blog post they posted about it, they talk about that they want to foster creative ideas, and that this is, of course, a side game from a smaller team. No Man's Sky takes up the majority of their time, but it looks so charming, and I love the ideas. And I know they're basic, universal ideas to some extent, but I love seeing them put out in an artistic way. They said that the core of this game is trying to find hope in a world that's lost all hope, and it just looks so good. I like this. I like these style of games, the art style. It looks so good.
Did you see the new trailer that was part of the Nintendo Indie World?
No.
Oh, dude. I don't know if it's the normal trailer or not, but I love this game. There's a lot of cool stuff announced at that Nintendo Indie World. They're going to be on other consoles and stuff.
Yeah.
This was one of them. I don't know if you saw a Baldo, but it looks like a level 5. I don't know if it is level 5 or not, because all I saw was a trailer, and I don't remember seeing level 5. But Baldo looks like a level 5 game, and it looks really cool.
Oh, yeah, it does. It looks like a lot like Ni no Kuni.
Yeah, Miyazaki's art direction from that. But I don't think it's from Naps, so that's who else? Wasn't that Ni no Kuni's second? No, level 5 did Ni no Kuni 2.
Yeah, I don't know who Naps is.
I don't either. They did Gekido.
I don't know what that is.
It's a very old PS1 game. I don't think it even launched in the US, but it was like based off and Gekido Advance.
Well, either way,
anime fighting game, basically.
Oh,
it did come out. Okay, I'll say I'm familiar with that name, so like and it had to have come out here, but it was very weird.
Is it kind of like a Power Stone style fighting game?
I don't even know what that is.
You know what Power Stone is?
Nope.
It's like a classic Capcom fighting.
I don't like fighting games, so like except like a few.
It was on Dreamcast, is where I played Power Stone and Power Stone 2. Look, tell me, you're gonna know whether or not you've played this. I promise you. Just
I've never played.
Look at it for a split second.
I've never played it.
That was very interesting. Dildos came up when I typed in Power Stone 2.
That didn't come up on mine. So
well, I went to images.
I mean, I am too.
I don't know what happened here. This got very odd, very quick.
Is my safe search on?
I don't know. I didn't know I turned it off. Anyway, it looks like that's what you were kind of showing me, but I don't know. Never heard of that game. But Power Stone is a fun old game. Also, it's hot in here.
It is hot in here. But yeah, the last campfire looks fantastic. Also, I know news is scarce this week, but just read through the Square Enix thing because because it says Square Enix has released a statement in regard to the COVID-19's possible effect on physical retail copies. The game will release on April 10th as intended, but due to changes in distribution and retailers across the countries, they do warn everybody that it is increasingly likely that some of you may not get a hold of the copy of your game on release date. And they're saying active on Twitter to let everybody kind of know and keep them in the know as well if anything does change it.
That was good, Saul.
Yeah, but I will say, like, this is where digital people prevail. Like, I had Animal Crossing preloaded. I don't have this game preloaded, but if I did.
This virus is what needed to happen to convince everybody to go with the digital future.
Get digital. You don't have to leave your house. You get the game on release day.
Guaranteed. You didn't say anything, but I was so surprised that you did not have a reaction at all when Blake, the champion of the digital future, just like 2 years ago, said, "Oh, I'm all physical again now." When he did it to me,
I said it makes sense for old stuff, which is what he's been doing a lot of.
It does, but it's just interesting. Like we were talking about Terminator Resistance, and he's trying to get it physically, which is like $80 to $90. When I bought it digitally for $17, so which also ties back into something another listener was talking about on Facebook. Liam was talking about a ton of PS3 games that were on sale, or that were part of a thing, and they're still $40 and $50, and it is a problem.
DS games are still like $40.
Yeah, if you go to the online store, or if you go to the stores within the systems themselves.
No, if you go to GameStop, a new 3DS game is $40.
Yeah, But what he's talking about is that a lot of these games you can buy used.
Oh, yeah. Like,
for much cheaper. Like The Darkness 2 was on there for $40. Yeah, sure. Some games will always go around that.
$60.
But there's The Darkness 2 is a fantastic game, but on PS3 digital store it's still $40. I bought that game for $3 on PC and played it.
Well, see, I think that's the catch with digital, right? Is that if you
It's like you have to wait for a sale. It's only going to be beneficial to you. If you want to play a game right then and there, but you don't want to spend $40 on a game that you could go get for PS3 for $10, then you kind of are. Even if you're on the store, then you kind of have to go this thing. Well, I'm going to put it on my wish list. If you're on computer, PlayStation doesn't even have a wish list yet. They've talked about adding.
They have terrible filter functions too.
Yeah, I don't think does Xbox have a wish list yet.
I have no idea.
I don't think they do, but that's something I'm surprised.
Games Pass on Xbox.
Yeah,
actually, I do think they do have a wish list on it because I do remember you could click something to add it to your want to play next thing or something.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, there you go.
But yeah, like the other day I was on PlayStation Store looking at sales, and then I was like, let me filter games, and I filtered, and then I filtered, and then games, and yet there's still NBA 2K20 currency popping up. So, dude, Sony's online store makes me so angry with that.
And
that is not a game.
I understand why it's doing it.
I don't, because that just have a whole separate thing for add-on or DLC or whatever.
It's because they don't have that. Well, because it's not add-on or DLC. It's currency. Make a tab for premium currencies, but they don't.
I
agree.
Even if you go to like their sales and then you go to games or game deals, is what it's called. They're still in there.
Yes, I know, and it shouldn't. I agree with you, but I'm saying I understand why they're there. Sony needs to. It's not that they need to work on the way their filters work. It's that they need to add more filter options to help deal with that problem.
I wonder if there's
because it's a issue.
But also, you know what else is an issue with them? You cannot use the app. I've decided to be smart and take away any cards that I have on anything and just use PayPal and have PayPal go through my main card.
Yeah.
You cannot use the PlayStation app to download games off of the PSN store if your only method of payment on there is PayPal. You have to go to the web browser and do it all through I do it on my phone, so it's still the same, but you cannot use the app.
Is that why the last few times I've bought games? Because I have that too. It doesn't give the download to PS4 option?
It won't even let you buy the game on the app.
Oh no! It let me buy the game.
No, I'm telling you, it will not. Like it'll say, like you have another payment on there than PayPal. Then
Maybe, but every time I do it because every now and then I do use the browser, I make sure I use PayPal. I didn't think my card was listed, but maybe it is.
I mean, and it could be that your main card is listed through your is your main card on PayPal. Mine is my credit card I use all the time.
Oh no, mine's my Sony card.
That also could be a thing too. That it has to do with PlayStation. But yeah, like if it's infuriating. But
anyway, we'll go ahead and go to the next thing so we can get into the deep dive reveal and talk about our thoughts on it. But the next piece of news leads directly into that. And I found this just to be really interesting because there are people that act, of course, in a number of different ways in support of who they want the best. But there's clearly something shown here that people are wanting it. So PS5 received its deep dive reveal this last week, as we talked about, and in showing just how hungry for information PlayStation fans are, this very developer and tech enthusiast focused dry deep dive has been watched over 13.5 million times in just 4 days, which is incredible.
Probably because people are having to rewatch it to understand it.
Probably. And actually, that brings us into just talking about that itself in earnest. Now, I do have something up that we can do it point by point. I'm going to talk about a little bit of these things.
I do want to be, though, because me and Brett have not talked about this topic at all in regards to how we're going to talk about it here. If it's okay with you, I want to be very light about this topic because there is parts of this that I still don't understand.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Not only that, but I will say, do not, if you've not watched it yet, which I highly doubt if you're listening to our podcast, go watch the Digital Foundry talk about it. It is a 40-minute long video, and it does a much better job about this technology.
Of explaining it to a layman.
Yes, explaining it to a consumer, because this original thing was meant for game developers and game developers only. Really.
That's for GDC. Essentially tech enthusiasts that care to follow it, but primarily developers.
One of my favorite things is that in the comments, somebody was putting Z's, and they said, this is for GDC, and he's like, I don't know what that is. It's Game Developer Conference, you idiot. That's like what the comments are saying. Or Game Dev Conference, whatever it is. Yeah. But yeah, that's what this is intended for. So we're gonna break this down as best as we can, and we're gonna get into something that I'm still confused about. Actually,
start with that. Yeah. What
is backwards compatible?
So this comes down to, I know that you read it because I saw your response to it.
Oh, I broke it down. It's a lot of corporate speak.
But here's the thing: all corporates are corporate speak.
No, they could have come out and said you are for sure getting these all backwards compatible.
Well, hold on. So let's just lay the facts. So the reason that this was originally a point of confusion, and it really was poorly handled. Again, this is a talk that was for GDC. The original thing that Mark Cerny had said, he keyed in on and said that of the top 100 PS4 games, we expect the majority of them to be backwards compatible, which made people think that we're only going to get 100 of the top PS4 games as backwards compatible, which was a problem. And then came the question, before they realized that he did specify, people were worrying, well, how do you determine what is the top PS4 game? What are the top 100 by what metric? And he did mention that he meant top 100 by in terms of hours played. So in the original mindset, even if that was worst case scenario 100, you know that you'd be getting 100 of the games that clearly are being played the most, which does make them the most important games to make backwards compatible to begin with.
So let me ask you this. Are games backwards compatible and then the top 100 games are boosted? Or is it that there are only 100 games that are going to be back compatible, but they're all boosted and they're looking at adding more?
No, so it's somewhere in between the two things that you just said.
Because that doesn't make sense.
But I'll describe it to you, because they have gone back and really have nailed in on what this is. They've done a consistently poor job. I think the biggest thing is that, again, so many non-tech people were focused on this, and so many people are looking at this for real information about the PS5 that they're going to go through, and they stumbled on that because of so many people doing this. So I'd say this, they marketed this reveal wrong. They probably should have been kind of quiet on this and just let people and aggregates watch this and break the information down in layman's terms as best as possible. Reach out for any extra stuff and then let them publish it, because it would have been a lot cleaner and people wouldn't have been so confused.
They could have just said.
So, and this is again where I'm at right here, and we could talk about what they should have done in a minute, but at least right now, from everything that I understand, and I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain, I'd say I'm 99.99% positive, what they're saying is that most PS4 games will be backwards compatible at launch. Most of them.
Okay.
But Of the top 100 is why he brought that up. Of the top 100, most of them are working flawlessly. So the reason he was bringing that up is the biggest games that most people play are going to be playable with day one. Past that, most of the games will be 100% compatible, with a section of those being able to benefit from boost.
See, this is what gets me.
Yeah.
Because their blog update specifically says, and this is what I highlighted, we're expecting backwards compatible titles will run at a boosted frequency, meaning that if it's backwards compatible, it is boosted.
Yeah, so, I need to go, because I actually read something earlier about it.
And that's what makes me think that there's only 100 games at launch, because if there are 100 that are boosted, all of them are going to be boosted. They're just giving us 100 at the time being. Because this new update specifically says, and even this is where I broke it down. It says, and I quote, "We believe the overwhelming majority of the 4,000 plus PS4 titles will be playable on PS5." And then they say, "We're expecting backwards compatibility titles to run at a boosted frequency on PS5 so that it could benefit from higher and more stable frame rates and potentially higher resolutions. We're currently evaluating games on a title-by-title basis to spot any issues that need adjustment from the original software developers." So they're saying that all backwards compatible games will run at boosted, yet we're only getting 100 boosted games. There's a conundrum here.
I get what you're saying, but I think you're reading. And again, it's worded poorly on their part.
They could just come out and say, like, "Hey guys, you're going to get everything backwards compatibility."
I think if you look at this statement, it's the one that matters the most. The overwhelming majority of the 4,000 plus PS4 titles will be playable on PS5. Now, again, you're looking for more clarification of, is that at launch? Is that
no? It's not even. It's not even.
They're going to be playable. I just don't think all of them will necessarily benefit from the boost. And if I had to say, do you know what I think? Which ones are actually going to benefit from boost?
All the first party ones.
I don't even mean that, because what they're talking about is games that will benefit from boost without having to be patched at all. And this is what I think is going on. I think what they're doing is testing games. The ones that they're worried about are games that don't have a locked frame rate, and there are plenty of them that don't. So if you do not have a locked frame rate and you start going into this boost, you can lock it, but it's naturally unlocked. I think. Or I think it depends on which setting you did. If you put it automatically capped it on one and not on the other. I don't remember completely, but I think what's going on here is that certain games that actually do play without a capped frame rate, if you run them through and they're trying to benefit from this boost thing, I think what's going to happen is there's a chance that because there's no cap, it makes it wonky. So what they're probably looking at is that certain games are going to be able to tap into this boost thing naturally because they're uncapped frame rate, and they'll be supported just fine because of the fact that there's no conflict issue. Some of them are going to run into a conflict issue. So what's probably going to have to happen is that instead of being able to run on a boosted frequency, what they're going to have to do is make sure they're only running on the 100% CPU acting as a PS4.
Yeah, the default.
So I think that's what's happening.
CPU frequency that was developed with the game in mind.
It's almost like we need a deep dive on backwards compatibility by itself.
And that's the crazy thing,
which may come
because
actually.
That's what I get is we're expecting backward compatible titles to run at a boosted frequency. So that makes it sound like all. But then they say, well, you get 100 that we have tested that are what is it? The exact thing. Let me see here.
I don't know.
We believe the overwhelming majority of the 4,000 titles will be playable. Okay. And then you say, but we're expecting backwards compatible games to be boosted. Okay. Well, you're going to get 100. Like right now, there's 100 boosted games. So is there 4,000 games that we can play with only 100 boosted?
I think what they're, again, saying, and it's bad wording, but if I had to extrapolate, if I had to extrapolate what I think they're saying, and then we can move on from this, is that they've tested, as their starting point, they chose to test first and foremost the top 100 games because they're the games that are going to be most likely continuing to be played the day PS5 launches.
Yes.
Because of that. So I think they've started with that, and they realize that most of those 100 are already working perfectly, and those other ones, they're seeing what may need to be done.
Across time, we'll get boosted patches.
Or maybe not even a patch, but the system will be able to somehow
run
adjust.
It better. Yeah.
And then I think from there, and they've already said they're going through and starting to test thousands of other games.
But what's crazy is that they were originally confusing about it. This new update to the blog post is even more confusing about it. Yeah. And then they just won't come out and say, yeah, guys, you get full backwards compatibility with this system, but you only get 100 boosted games. They will run at a PS5 frequency. And then then they could just say that and just be done with it. But they're not.
I mean, I get you. I do.
Because what I think is I think the entire library will be available with only 100 games at launch boosted. However, as time goes on, you will see more and more games that will become developer updated boosted or anything like that.
Or even the system finds a way to get it. Because what we can kind of tap into here as a analog to this is Xbox One X's treatment of letting you play Xbox original and Xbox 360 games in a what do you want to say? I guess I'll say a boosted setup. So certain games get an Xbox One X situation where what the system goes through and renders the game 9 times or whatever it is, and then pulls that back down, and that's how they are able to make a game like Red Dead Redemption run at native 4K.
Yeah.
Or essentially, the textures are not 4K, but the game itself is running at 4K, and then the textures, if they were already higher end textures, are going to look better because of it. So with all that said, that happens in a very weird way from Xbox, and that might be what's happening here. But I wonder if we're going to get a more in-depth backwards compatibility talk if they go through the point of eventually doing a dive that's more for the consumer face. If they do actually announce any plans for at least PS1 and PS2 backwards compatibility.
I guarantee you,
we'll see.
Within 2 months, we will have a state of play focused on the unveiling of the PS5, unveiling of the controller, and a full comprehensive answer on what backwards compatibility is for them.
Yeah, it would be a huge shame.
They're getting drugged under the mud by, there's Nibble, I think it's his name, or Nibble. Yeah, on Twitter is dragging them under the mud. Yang Ye is dragging them under the mud. There's famous personalities out there like, guys, fix your wording. Nobody understands what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then there are people in the comments that are arguing about it too, because nobody understands it properly. And we all have things we think and what we hope is what it is, but we don't know for sure. And I think that they're getting called out right now. Somebody even says, well, didn't y'all know that Don Matrick works at Sony now? So
oh, man.
I will say that is my one negative thing about this whole entire fiasco was I do kind of wish that they had done a more consumer version of this, since everybody is home now. They're not going to, some people aren't able to go to work, can't go to school. I think that this should have been a more fun thing, and the whole GDC thing could have come later. To expand upon what they would have delivered in the first one.
Well, I think why even if that's going to be the goal, right? Why even bother with the GDC thing at all? Why not just scrap that and do one that's a mix of, for people who are tech enthusiasts, they can get that, but here's also a way to show it. It would have taken time, I really think, is what it comes down to.
Let me ask you this too, because it does not. This doesn't seem like this to me, but do developers really use this video as reference?
I think so.
Do they? Because it doesn't seem like they do.
Because here's the thing. If you look at the general consumer consensus about this, is the average consumer is kind of like, I didn't understand a lot of that, and it has 10.5
teraflops,
and they're focusing on one thing.
Yeah.
But almost overwhelmingly, every post I've seen that's positive about the PlayStation 5 is people who are developers who are freaking out, going, "Oh my god, I can't believe this!" Or people who are really big into tech and are known for it. People like from Digital Foundry. People who are on teams that make games that are really, really put. So when you see people who are like co-directors of The Last of Us 2, which that one's a little bit weird because there's potential conflict of interest in terms of whether they're being genuine. But let's just say, and I don't know for sure, but let's just say that one of Rockstar's head developers sees it and it says, "This is amazing. What we'll be able to do with this is going to be incredible." It does show you that this is a way for developers to understand more of what's going on and what they're going to be able to work with as they move forward, because not every developer is going to have a PS5 thing right now anyway. So when you're going through and looking at that, I think it does help people, and it helps people who are looking to get into console manufacturing. Past that, though, to round out specifically backwards compatibility, and then we can move on. The only thing I'll say is that it would be a really big shame for Sony to let Microsoft, who's been in the game shorter than them and has impacted it in no hate on Microsoft, but they've impacted the video game business in less ways, I think, than Sony. They have done some very major ones. We have Microsoft to thank for online gaming and its popularity, and no one can ever take that away from them, at least on the console side. Anyway, with that said, I think that it'd be a real shame, considering how many crazy original good franchises that Sony has, to not try and include as much backward compatibility as you can. If PS3 is still a state of concern where they can't do it well, then that's fine. I don't think there's any problem with that. I think all it comes down to at this point is that Sony needs to put as much of history of their consoles as they can into this one, and not let the competition be the one who's getting away with that. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Again, I think it's cool that Microsoft's doing that, but Sony should be doing it too. That's essentially all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So from there, we're going to move on. I think from here, we're going to actually just talk about a little bit about what the system does from what we understand, and kind of give you our best example of kind of a layman's ability, and talk about the things that we thought were cool from what we did understand. So one of the first things I want to bring up, and it's one of the things that they actually opened up the deep dive with, is the number one requested thing from developers, and that is the SSD, the solid state drive. Saul, I want to ask you a basic question. You have been the person for a long time now that has been on the fence about whether or not you agreed with, or whether or not you believed the speeds that they were talking about from an SSD. Has this helped you at all?
It's not about believing either. It's like, I want to see that Sony is the king of talking about a technology or a peripheral or a feature and then abandoning it almost always. The PlayStation Eye, I can't think what the VR gun's called now, but the VR gun isn't supported by a lot of VR supported titles.
Oh yeah.
You have a lot of things that they've started up. The whole PS Now thing, I guess, technically came from Genkaku.
Oh no! Oh God, I can't believe it. Now I can't. Gaikai.
I think I put Gaikai and Hinkaku together, which is the Vita hacking app. But yeah, like there's people say that that's kind of where PS Now came from and all that. I'm not entirely sure that's true, but I will be shocked if what they said can happen actually is put to use in more than first party titles. The fact that they say that it only takes you 5 seconds to look to the right, they can render the entirety of your right in 5 seconds. Or
in 1 second. It actually was half a second.
Yeah,
is what he
half
said.
a second.
Yeah.
Because I think the actual stat there was 5.5 gigs a second.
Yeah, 5.5 gigabytes a second. So he said that, and that's uncompressed or whatever. So essentially, if you're doing compressed data, you can do so much more. Is what he's saying. You know, if you're dealing with compressed data, you can handle it differently. I was just rewatching a little bit of it this morning when I was going through this. That's actually the thing that excites me. So this goes into, the SSD is a very big difference between these. So I don't know if you remember the leaks that we've been talking about here and there. The leaks for a long time were that, yes, the overall power potential of the Xbox is higher than the PlayStation 5's, but that the SSD is greatly superior in the PS5, and we know now that is true. I mean, that is what's happening here.
Yeah. So you're
now, the one thing about that becomes a situation of weirdness here is that because these systems are so different and the way they're doing things is so different, there's no real way to say which one's actually more powerful, because teraflops is specifically a GPU potential power standpoint, and there's so much stuff around that, and he even addresses that in the video, not specifically in regards to Xbox, but he specifies that teraflops are interesting and a good metric, but they're not everything, because there's things that don't tie into teraflops that when you increase your your chip speed, essentially how many gigahertz is it moving at, if you bring that clock speed up, all those other things increase, but that doesn't increase the teraflops at all, though it does give you a lot more to work with. So one of the things I want to do with this is make sure we're not going too tech talky, that way we don't confuse people.
That's why I wanted to keep it really, really light, mainly because like there's going to be better outlets than us to learn about this, and B, it's because there's still stuff here that we are unsure about, like the IO throughput. I know what that is. I don't know that's utilized in a system, but I don't know metrics for it at all. You could tell me what that has is good or bad. I don't know. But anyways, so
I guess I'm glad you brought that up, because that's actually one of the things that's like most exciting to me, and this ties into what I was mentioning earlier, so we can get into that after. But I love the idea of choosing to use the SSD as essentially RAM, and that's what's happening.
Way, yeah, it is.
You're going to, because of what they're able to do with their speed, 5.5 gigabytes a second from this, what's going to happen, they're talking about the ability to essentially tap into directly to the solid state drive to get your textures and whatnot on the fly, so that if somebody turns, you can go, hey, and his exact words, if it takes roughly a half second to turn, can you render everything in that half second, or what can you render in that half second?
Yeah.
And he said about 4 gigabytes of compressed data, and he
lot.
mentions that's about what he feels is right for next gen's needs.
Yeah,
so
that's a lot of
to me,
a lot of compressed game data. That is. There are games that are compressed that cost half that are massive games still.
So
indie games
to give this like more of the layman spiel, what I love about this is that no longer would the game need to work the way it did. The hard drive of the PS4 was essentially a bottleneck. You have to deal with what the hard drive's limitations were on speed. So the games have to be built around that. What he's saying now is that you can build a game that doesn't even have to ever move any of the textures or anything into RAM. It can if you want it to, but if you don't want it to, the speed is high enough that it'd be able to pull directly from the drive and move this stuff as quickly through to where if it needed to, it could supersede RAM.
Yeah.
Just go around it. Now, that's amazing because that's going to change the way that people want to make their games. Now, this does come up to what I was mentioning, and this is exciting but also weird for the prospective future of a nothing ever being truly exclusive anymore. And that means that it's exciting in the sense that the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X are so different when the Xbox One, and the PS4 were so similar.
Yeah.
That if you look at PS4 and the Xbox One, there really is no reason that you couldn't just take the same game and scale it down a little bit if you needed to make it run on the Xbox One at launch. And of course, now the Series X, you could take the game from the PS4 Pro and scale it up a little bit to make it look great on the Series X because they're so similar. Now, what's happening here is that when we start talking about exclusives, especially from Sony's side, with the fact that they're going to be potentially using this solid state drive speed the way they are, it's exciting that there's something so drastically different that you're going to see games that are being made to use these things in very different fashions. But it also means that if you take a game that's made to tap into this crazy hard drive speed, is it even possible to take that exact game the way that it is and the way that it's made and put it onto the Xbox? Because the Xbox right now doesn't have, the Xbox Series X will not have that speed for the SSD. It's going to have about half of that speed, which is still impressive, but it's not what Sony's doing. And it doesn't mean that one's better or worse. And that's, I think, that the biggest thing I want to say here. It's not that one's better or worse. That comes down to just preference of what the game developer is trying to make and what they see. But it does mean that exclusives that are being made and trying to tap into these specific features differences, it's going to be hard for them to pull that off, because speed is not scalable in the same sense as, if you build a game that requires that speed, that's not the same as building a game and going, well, hey, our game is going at 4K 120 frames per second. Well, if we put it on here, maybe we can still do true 4K, but that won't be able to handle 120 frames per second. So we're going to scale the frames per second down to 60. We may even have to scale the 4K down to just sub 4K a little bit, whatever it is. Graphics are scalable. Speed is not going to be scalable in the same sense. So go ahead, Saul.
Well, my thing is that I am kind of curious. In a point you made where this may be technology that cannot be developed onto one system and then put on another. In a sense, you have the way the game is developed for this SSD. This is what worries me, because I hope that's not true, because that means that you will not see this being used pretty often from third-party developers. That would mean that the development for the PS5 would just be too annoying and too challenging for them, and it might even be too time-consuming for some of them to not even worry about doing it, so they don't include it, or they don't get these games. So I could actually see maybe Call of Duty not being able to do something, and Sony saying with Activision, they have a normal partnership like they have had for the past couple of years, them canceling that partnership because Call of Duty can't implement that. People at Activision can't implement that as easily as Sony wants them to. Maybe it's too time consuming. It could be a multitude of things. If it's something that isn't too far off of what a very common development path is, we won't see it used except by Sony's first party. And this goes back into what I was saying is, are we going to see this used? And how often are we going to see it used? Because I can guarantee you'll see it used from Sony first party for sure.
Yeah.
Sony second party, maybe depending on the studio. But then you got third party, and then you got multi-platforms. I don't think we'll see this often unless it's very easy to implement, which in the case if it is, then that means that it's win-win. You have your super powerful Xbox Series X that can play games in true 4K. I think
I expect true 4K from both systems, by the way.
Yes.
But I think that Sony is much more gearing for 4K 60 or even 30, depending on what they choose to do per game.
Yeah.
Whereas Microsoft seems keen on the possibility of eventually having games that can tap into upwards of 120 frames per second.
Gears 5, if I'm not mistaken, now I don't have a 120 hertz monitor or anything, but Gears 5 that they showed in the Xbox Series X thing they did like last week was at 120 hertz. It was either 120 hertz or 60 native 4K with 4K textures.
Yeah.
Which is that's not a console thing, like ideally.
Now,
I don't think
like
think there's a game that can run true 4K resolution with true 4K textures at 60 frames per second on console. I don't think there is one.
Not right now.
Yeah, and it could be an indie game or something that's out there that could do that fairly easily, but no AAA game for certain it can do that. But I don't know if that means that because even then the teraflops, which I'm gonna have to go back to that because that's what people are stouting and stuff. Teraflops are a big deal and they're not a big deal at the same time. Teraflops can determine a lot for the GPU, but does not determine a lot for the game overall. And I think that's where a lot of people are coming into problems with this, like saying, oh, well, the Xbox has 12 or 12 or 13, and then the PS...
It's like 12.1 or something, I think.
Yeah. I think theirs is 12.5. Isn't it Sony's 10.1?
Maybe it's on here. I don't think it is, but maybe
but yeah,
is.
it's a 20% difference. That's a lot. It is. It really is. But it's also not. It's a lot depending on what you're talking about. Graphical fidelity? Sure. Running a game? Frame dropping in like that? No. That has nothing to do with the CPU. So yeah, you're gonna have one console that's gonna be like it kind of almost goes back to what people used to say about like the 360 PS3. The 360 had games that looked amazing, and then you had the PS3 that were doing completely different things with those games. Like the load times on PS3 were better in some of these games than they were on the 360. The 360 also had this weird cache you had to go in and clear every now and then to get load times. Like when I first played Oblivion on 360, it was 3 minutes.
I do remember that.
It was 3 minute loading windows. You had to go in and tap like R bumper, L bumper, X, Y, X or something to clear your cache. And it's super dumb. You do not have to do that on PS3 at all. But
PS3 had other issues to get around.
Yeah.
So before we go too far from it, I mean, if you have anything else you want to go in there, I do want to say that I feel like a lot of that's being at least touched on. We'll never know until the system's out.
Yeah, you will never know until the system's out. I fully intend these games to run. I really want everything to run at 1080p, 60 for sure. Or an option to go 4K 30 or 4K 60, depending on the game. Because you're not going to run. I don't think you're going to run Greedfall 4K 60. That is not a game. I'm not Greedfall.
Cyberpunk?
No. The other fall. The new game. Greedfall is not.
Oh, Godfall.
Godfall, yeah. The names are too similar. But yeah, you're not going to run Godfall at 4K 60, I don't think. You might, but like...
Oh, I really do. I mean, if I got to say right now from everything we're seeing, 4K 30 is going to be 100%. 4K 60, yeah. I see as very possible.
I see it's possible if you use stuff like interpolation and stuff like that again.
I think it's... I don't know. We'll see. It depends on how much the CPU is a bottleneck. And we don't know much about Zen 2 cores because...
They're not out yet.
Our DNA stuff is not quite out yet, and that's the GPU actually. But because GPU and CPU work so close together. But again, I don't want to go too crazy on this. So backing up to that, I think that they are trying to at least do these. I think two things happen here. Goes back to what I was just saying a second ago. So I don't think that there's any reason that we're going to see games not come to PlayStation because of this. I think if anything, what you said that's potentially true is that some third-party games just won't do it unless it's incredibly easy to implement. All that will mean, though, is that you maybe won't have as quick of a load times as you would have had on something else, or whatever it may be. Speed is going to be the only thing that's affected. Well, now, the game could still play because if you're... Okay, so the game, let's just break it back down. Let's say Call of Duty, like you're talking about, is on Xbox and on PlayStation.
Yeah.
Graphically, the only thing that's going to that's going to be an issue is that graphically they might have to scale back the PlayStation 5 version a little bit in comparison to the Xbox Series X version. There's no reason, if third parties are using the Series X, if that becomes the easier thing to base as your base console, then they'll use that. And then they'll just, as they need to and as they are willing to, tap into the PlayStation 5's extra benefits, right? If that's end up being what happens. So for me, I see it as, because of the fact that graphics are scalable, there's nothing that you could put on the Xbox that wouldn't be doable on the PlayStation 5. Now, the inverse is going to be harder because the Xbox doesn't have the fit. So all that's going to happen is you won't see games not coming out on PlayStation 5 because of this weird little quirk thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But what you may see is that third parties aren't tapping into it as much as they could be, which is a shame. And of course, in this situation, first parties are always going to be the ones that are going to benefit the most from this thing, because they're going to be the ones that are like, oh, well, we can make the game specifically for this, which goes back to what I like about, you know what I said, oh God, clearing the cache. Do you remember what I said earlier about exclusives and getting them between consoles? Oh man, watching that has almost made me lose my train of thought.
Yeah, that's stupid.
I'm trying to go back to where I was.
Enter a cheat code to delete your cache. Or
so,
clear your cache.
in regards to what somebody mentioned earlier about not thinking any game should be truly exclusive. What I like about exclusives is that they lean into the hyper focused optimization of the console they're running on. So now that we're getting systems that are very, very different from each other, I relish even more so than before the idea of exclusives, because if you buy the PlayStation 5 and it has this weird thing, but third parties 50% of the time use it, and they don't use it to the fullest extent that a first party game would, then what ends up happening is that you really aren't getting the most out of that system. What's so great about a game like The Last of Us on PS3 is that it could happen on PS3 because they were able to 100% make that game work perfectly for the PS3's strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
So when you have a game like, if you look at The Last of Us versus other games that were coming out at that time point, I think The Last of Us really stood above the competition because it was able to be that. Third parties could not hit that same level. So now when you're looking at that, that's going to happen again. And I'm actually kind of excited for that, because exclusives are going to give me a reason to see this thing used for exactly what Sony, the creator, thought, it'd be really cool to do this and see what people make when you give them this kind of leverage. And then they can go to their first party and say, hey, you don't have to worry about making for the PC or for the Xbox or for any other number of hardware possibilities. All you have to do is make something for this. What would you do given this as your, and then you'll see some really crazy stuff that's interesting come out of that. And that's okay. I don't mind that. Probably 20% of the games that come on the console are going to be able to benefit from that power, as long as the other games still look good and work well. That's really all that matters to me. But I do think that there's something to be said about being worried that it's not going to use all of the individual things that are going to be unique about PlayStation 5 in comparison.
Yeah, because you're still going to get these games that are going to be vast in nature. And I do want to point out something that people do seem to be getting incorrect on everywhere, Reddit and Twitter and YouTube comments. So the people are saying that the PS5 are not going to have load screens anymore. That's just not true. There are still going to be games that cannot that the devs are going to poorly create that are going to have load screens. And I mean like load screens like Bloodborne or a startup menu screen or something like that. People are saying that even if they do, that the Xbox is going to have like a 10-minute loading time and the PS4 or 5 is going to have like a 2-second load time. First of all,
no, that's way too much of a gap.
It's not even in minutes. Like how fast an M2 or M.2 NVMe is when it comes to loading games, that is the fastest thing you can have. You can load into a planet in Destiny in like less than 5 seconds with that. You can load in the tower in less than 3. It's just ridiculously expensive. Luckily, you get one in the Xbox, but yeah. People think that that this means that load times are 100% going to be non-existent. No, load times are still going to be there. May not be for all games, but they're still happen. And that's people are just looking at things to kind of compare with. I
should say this on both systems, truly on both systems, but on PlayStation 5, it's just going to be greater because of the speed. It is true that for the most part, load screens. And Mark Cerny says it. This is all based off of if things happen the way they want, of course. You never know. Sometimes they promise things that don't quite work the way that you think. That always happens. It's always a possibility.
You got to think about all the third-party developers and all the multi-platform games that can't do like you said. They can put it in there for PlayStation. Sure,
well, yeah, but the nature of the hardware, the nature of the thing that's giving it the benefit is already going to be there.
Yes.
So there's no way to slow down the base speed of NVM2E. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
So all that's going to happen in this situation is that if games aren't able to dig into that extra speed, they're still going to benefit from the overall speed. So load speeds are probably going to be, load windows and load things are going to be a thing of the past insofar as you will see a transition, but there will probably not be an actual load screen anymore because of how fast it's going to be.
Well,
now, from that, one of the things that Mark Cerny said...
Well, yeah, but that's what they are.
But you're not going to see one that's like Bloodborne where you see information come up.
Yeah, now
you're
I
not
can
because
see
there's
that
no
being-
need for that now. But what actually Mark Cerny said,
Watch
and
Grand Theft Auto 6 still have the stupid beginning loading screen that happens in every Grand Theft Auto game.
maybe, but one thing Mark Cerny said that if true is telling is he said that developers with this technology may actually have to slow the game down because of how quick these transitions are going to happen.
Yeah, because that you do things like people don't realize that like going through a door very slowly in a game is a loading screen. Like it's just like what the animation of you not playing for a second, and that honestly is probably like what a lot of Capcom and Square Enix games are. Like I thought about it, in Final Fantasy VII, you literally take one step before then you have a text. It's loading up the world you're about to open up. It's not. It's a loading screen, and Kingdom Hearts 3 probably did it too.
Yeah.
Resident Evil 2 kind of does it too, very very minimally in that game, but it happens. And I think though, you're not gonna be able to cut that out of a game. For a multi-platform game, say if Call of Duty has this part that acts as that, where you run up to a door and you have to open up a door real slowly or something, it's loading the area behind it, and that's the only reason you're having to do that. They can't cut that from one game and not put it in like the PS5 version. It's not going to be an open door. Like all these loading screens that are aesthetically there are still going to be there for multi-platform games. But everybody is looking for a thing to compare them to right now, and I get it that you want to compare, your favorite console versus the enemy console or the rival console. It's just hard. Like we're dealing with brand new technologies we've not seen before in one of them, and we're dealing with console strength that we've never seen nor thought I would see, especially with RDNA 2 being in the Xbox One Series X2.
If I had to compare, the closest we've probably been in a power standpoint to this is PS3. Now, PS3 was just really hard to work with, but it was really powerful. I think in terms of power compared to what was expected at the time of technology, the problem is that PS3 was incredibly powerful, but it wasn't necessarily as beneficial in making games as you would have thought. So this comes down to, this is clearly looks more aimed at making games well, and that's hopefully what we're going to see. But I want to go ahead and get through the rest of this, because first of all, Saul, I know that you've got to go and handle the stores, and I don't want Annie waiting on you too long. I don't know if you realize it's almost 3:00.
Yeah, I did.
So anyway, what we're going to go ahead and go through now is a couple things. So one thing is going through to the GPU. We've already talked about the GPU and the CPU are going to have variable speeds. Now it's going to be a lot different than what you see from like phones or from even the PS4 Pro. All the systems are going to react in the same way. Like every PS5 will react in the same way in the same environment, regardless of temperature. So that's good. And I don't want to get too much further into that. Essentially, though, the power is going to be able to move around where needed, and that should be able to essentially make up for any of these differences in power. I think is what they're aiming for. Even though it's Mark Cerny specifically says, just because this is here does not mean that you don't have power elsewhere that's not accounted for in the teraflop number. So I think they're trying to find ways to give you the same performance as 12 teraflops, but without actually having to do that. And that probably helps them in cost as well. Now, I will go to the next thing that I think is something that everybody was really interested in, and definitely Saul, I remember him mentioning that he didn't know how it was going to work out, is ray tracing. Now, the first thing I want to bring up before we start talking about the actual graphical use of ray tracing, and this, I'm gonna kind of save it because this kind of goes into the audio thing. So we're going to talk about graphical ray tracing. So for anybody that doesn't know, ray tracing is essentially a way of looking at the environment, casting how many rays you can over, and then using and looking at that information to more adequately show light within that area. So the way that PlayStation 5 is trying to do this on a more budget-friendly setup is that there's levels and scales of how you can do it. So you can go to global illumination, which is just trying to get a better way for light to come down and hit everything and how it's going to react. Then you have improved shadows that you can actually go and check out, and I urge you to, if you're interested in this, go look at games that have been added, have had ray tracing added in, even sometimes through mods, and see how much different the lighting acts and reacts. It's really interesting. Reflections is the next level up of things that you're going to be able to get, more realistic reflections that are not having to use screen space reflection. I don't want to go too deep in all that. And then full ray tracing is the last thing. And Mark Cerny was talking about, of course, developers are going to be able to kind of use this and scale across it. So I think it kind of answers a little bit of what Saul was talking about. This is real ray tracing, but it's like using ray tracing in a scaled fashion instead of it being always 100% full ray tracing. Yeah. So if a developer really wants to sell their scene and they have the overhead power to do so, they can go ahead and use full ray tracing. But if they only want to do reflections, they can only focus on reflections. And that's interesting. So ray tracing is going to be something that's going to change the way lighting looks in games. I would definitely expect you think that games have great lighting right now, and don't get me wrong, they do. But there's a lot of work that goes into that. Ray tracing is going to simplify a lot of that and let that same great lighting happen without having to have teams that are focused on pre-baking all this lighting in.
I've still come to the conclusion I still don't really like HDR that much. I've tried it on multiple different games, and it's just like, meh.
I love it.
It makes it look so dull, and I don't like dullest realistic looking games. Like I like contrasting, like in Uncharted, where it may be deeper like skin tones, but then like the green is more green than it would be in real life, obviously, as opposed to like neutral skin tones that look more realistic with dimmer greens.
I'd say it depends on game and use, because as you can see with a game, even like Red Dead Redemption 2 that launched without real HDR, it goes to show that developers haven't always known what to do with HDR.
Greedfall also has terrible HDR.
It looked great on my TV, but that was actually about
it just became dull.
That was the other thing I was about to say is TV matters, and as much as you have a good deal on those TVs, getting HDR on a $200 TV is not going to be the same HDR that's in a $1,400 TV.
Excuse you.
Okay, but you get my point.
Yeah,
and of course the type of TV you have. So realistically, HDR on OLED is going to be a lot more noticeable than HDR on an LED. It's just how it goes. But I would urge you to go and look and try out a game like Horizon. It's amazing just how much more pop there is for the green in something like Horizon. I think it depends on the game and how they use it. I didn't even think Greedfall had HDR.
Oh, it does.
I don't remember it telling me to turn it on.
It does, because my TV does this weird thing, and it might be all TVs that do this. When it goes to HDR, it flickers.
Yeah, flickers, and it says HDR in the corner. Yeah,
my TV does that for. It did it for another game.
I'd be willing to bet that's not real HDR.
Or it doesn't look like it. It looks like it turns the game black and white with a yellow tinge. Like it just looks dull.
You should bring Greedfall over and look at it on my TV.
Well, yeah, I would if it was digital.
True. If I ever get it again.
What other game?
Because I promise you. Dude, there are so many games that the HDR helped a ton. Red Dead Redemption looks so much better now than
that might be another game that I'm thinking of. But I can't remember if I kept it on or off.
There's two different HDR versions in Red Dead Redemption as well. One of them they still call HDR, and it's the one that the game launched with, which is not real HDR. Then there's real HDR, which looks dramatically different. Definitely in the way that lighting actually envelops things, and that's the crazy part. But, I mean, that's one of the things that's going to be weird about this is HDR, unlike ray tracing, thankfully, HDR is something that's going to be a little bit more based on the TV that you have. Thankfully, ray tracing will be visible across all TVs. You'll see it.
What's your icon in Discord? I've always wondered. so you can answer this question live on the air, so all of our people in
Discord. Live on the air. If you are in our Discord and you wonder what it is, I was changing from my my Christmas Sora, and I said I don't know what I want to make my thing now. And Mr. Richard Radio Race in the Discord sent me a picture of an elephant
with its trunk
over a wall of an outside public toilet that's got little brick things.
Yeah,
and his nose is going down into the toilet and drinking water.
Gotcha. It's hilarious.
And I've just never bothered to change it because I mean it's funny anyway. Okay, so moving on from ray tracing, I think the next thing to probably do is talk about audio and how audio goes into ray tracing. So one of the things they're doing with ray tracing is they're using that mapping that's happening with those rays going out, and they're letting the audio information read that. And one of the things that's going to be that people probably don't think about right now is that in a game, it's really hard for them to change the way the audio sounds based off of where you're located in the game. So typically if you're playing a game and the audio sounds like you're in a cave, it's because they recorded and processed that audio before it ever got on the disc to sound like someone in the cave.
Yeah.
Because they're scripting it to play when you're in a cave. One of the things that's going to be able to happen with this is that the audio itself can just be normally recorded. And then it can be adjusted based off of the environment around it to have certain effects.
Almost like a profile assigned to it during certain areas of the game.
Yeah, so essentially if the game sees that you're going into an area that's cavernous, then the game in the ray tracing and the audio profile can essentially add reverb in real time so that suddenly when you're inside of a cave, you hear the echoing of your voice off of the rock walls. And that can happen in real time. So you can start a conversation outside of the cave. Like let's say you're playing Uncharted, you're out in a forest and you can start the conversation, and then midway through the conversation, you start entering a cave, you're going to hear real time that audio change to have the amount of reverb you would expect out of a cave. And that's really cool. I actually think, we were all talking like, what are they going to do with audio back when Mark Cerny talked about in that Wired interview?
Yeah.
What are they going to do with audio in regards to ray tracing? And this is a brilliant use.
It is. And
the calculations are already happening. Why not let the audio happen and
at the same
tap
time.
into that?
Yeah. Makes sense. Like that audio game from this is what I'm really excited for.
Yes, and we'll talk about audio. We'll go ahead and talk about audio right now, actually. So one of the things that Sony's doing here is talking about that the PlayStation 4's audio stuff was not really a leap, and if anything, it was kind of a step back from the PlayStation 3. He actually brings up and talks about the cell processor and how it handled things, and how it was really good for handling audio. So one of the things they're doing now, and this makes sense with their purchase of that audio company, I can't remember the name of them off the top of my head right now, last year, but they're known for being in games and dealing with games. So with this, they're talking about being able to set up things where the 3D audio that they've tampered with and toyed with and that you can somewhat experience in VR right now, that's what part of what that breakout box does, is it takes the audio from the game, pulls it in, and then gives it this quality that's going to give it, not quality, it gives it the information it needs to make it 3D and then be able to turn your head, hear the audio differently. That's something that you don't normally get in games, and you definitely don't get it well. Shadow of the Tomb Raider recently, one of the problems I had is that the game always sounded like, even if I was directly behind somebody, it was trying to make it, I couldn't hear the people because it was lowering their volume so much that it's like, well, this, even if I'm directly beside the person, it's acting as if they're very far away because you're supposed to be walking around them. So in an effort to be realistic, they're actually worsening my experience.
Yeah.
Like the game music was overshadowing people's audio, and if it wouldn't have been for subtitles that I turned on, I'd had no clue what they were saying. And this is important story information.
That's terrible.
So yeah, terrible thing. But one of the things they're wanting to do here is 3D audio so that it can look at where you are and where your head is and all these different things and where you would be within the world and try and produce the audio in a way that's going to be best for you. Now, one of the ways that they're talking about doing that is by giving you a profile based off of where your ears are in relation to the rest of your head. And of course, Sony talked about that. Sounds a lot like Sony.
It does.
Conspiracy? Did Sony breed Mark Cerny to be? No. Anyway.
Test tube baby. That's why he craves ears. He eats them. That's his food.
Anyway, he talks about the fact that they're going to, because of course you can't sit there and get everyone's perfect profile, which requires them to put an apparatus of cameras around and kind of do this thing. And then essentially the game will use that information to make the audio as pristine for you as it can. So what they're going to do from launch is that they have plans to have multiples of these HRTFs in, and you can choose one and then go through a test and see which one sounds the best for you and has the best effects for you. And then eventually in the long term, they're talking about plans to try and have a system that can actually tailor it to you. Yeah. Now, he mentioned sending in pictures of ears, potentially. That was just one idea of many of what you could do.
One bad idea of many.
Well, but I understand it. You wouldn't send a picture into them. Essentially what you'd do is you'd upload a picture to your PlayStation, and it would use a learning algorithm to apply the best look that it can to what they've known from their machine learning to fit your ear. It is weird, though, and I don't think a lot of people would want to do it.
Yeah, I'm not putting my ear on my PlayStation just so machine learning can...
Here's what I should say. I don't think a lot of people would want to do it, but when you don't understand, without doing it, you don't understand the potential benefit, right? If there was some magical way that they could let you hear the benefit that might happen, then you could weigh against your head of how much am I weirded out by them getting a picture of my ear versus the benefit that I will gain from it.
That has to be a terrible job in the AI world. Hey, Scott, what have you been learning today? Ears. What about you? Phone numbers. Oh, guess I'll go back to my ears now.
But anyway, It's going to definitely, it's one of those things that I think they're going to have a problem of in terms of, it's a really cool idea and it sounds amazing. I think the biggest problem they're going to have is how do you show that? And I think they had the same problem with PSVR. How do you show the benefits without letting people try it themselves? And this is even harder because everybody's HRTF is different. VR, for the most part, they built in the ability to slide it and change the focus so that it was comfortable for as many people as possible. But this is even harder. This is going to be a challenge where I wonder what they're going to do to try and let people hear this. I think that they've at least are on the right side by including multiple HRTFs, as many as they can, so that you can at least get as close to hearing the benefits as possible by going through the different profiles that are included. But it's going to be interesting to see what Sony does with that. And if anything, it goes to show how different the two manufacturers are thinking. Microsoft has not said a word about anything even remotely like this. So it's cool to see that Microsoft's focusing on raw GPU power and what that can do. And then a huge case so that you don't have to deal with, instead of having to worry about all these different heat things that can happen and having to variable things down, just have a huge case. It may look weird, but it's going to give you the benefit that you're looking for. Instead, Sony's over here like, well, what can we do to make audio better? Audio hasn't changed in a long time. What can we do to change the way people make games with speed?
What can we do to sell you some of our earbuds?
Yeah. The cool thing is, I should go ahead and say this HRTF thing would actually be something that you would hear across all devices. You would hear the difference without having to get anything special. Right now, you could do Dolby Atmos, right? But Dolby Atmos is only 30 audio sources. And of course, you have to go buy this thing. In this particular thing, the hope would be hundreds of audio sources and being able to hear it from even just a normal 2-speaker TV. Now, again, these are things that easily exist in the ability to be really easy to talk about, but maybe not actually happening.
Yeah. I mean, and you got to think about it this way too. Like, most of the people who are going to be playing these games are going to get a headset of some kind. So if Sony can even...
I don't think most. If I actually had to be honest, dude, I think that you think that, and here's the thing. I could also think that not, because I don't. You use a headset often. I never use a headset.
Well, I'm just saying, look how many I say copies, I guess that's the right word, but look at how many units of a PlayStation Gold headset is sold over the course of like the last 4 years.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Do you think that people are actually using that for gaming 100% of the time?
Could be, yeah.
Even when they're not online? Because I think that when you're talking about it from you have to have a headset on to talk to people online, that's one thing. And people are buying those headsets so that they have a comfortable, good sounding headset from when they're playing online. But when people are not playing online, like me, I think most people just use whatever their setup is because it's more comfortable, it's easier. You don't have to worry about charging a headset.
But
you don't have to worry about not being able to hear people out from around
that kind of becomes a problem though, right? Is like, if one of the big things this coming generation for Sony is audio and nobody's getting their headphones, they can truly support it, because not every TV speaker is going to be able to support this.
That's
properly.
what he's saying. Is what they're, again, that's what it comes down to, what you believe and what actually happens. Now, in a ideal world where what Sony said is true, they're able to do this on a normal 2 TV setup, a normal earbud, a normal anything.
But the quality of audio can only be as good as the speaker.
But it's not about the quality of audio. This is about the way that your ears are actually perceiving the audio that's coming out. This is about changing the way the audio is processed, so that it hears for you. And I get it. It's so different from what you're used to.
It is.
That it's hard to imagine how they're going to achieve this.
I don't want to trust it.
Because that's exactly, when people get Dolby Atmos, that's exactly what they're doing. They're buying a piece of equipment that's able to do this.
Yeah.
But Sony's talking about doing this in a way that would be that even if you have a normal pair of earbuds that came with your phone, you put it in and it'll work. Now, whether that actually happens remains to be seen, but it's exciting to think about. A couple other things that we're going to do, and then we're going to get out of here. In relation to, we were talking about earlier this week, Saul and I, Microsoft revealed their plan for expandable storage on the Xbox Series X. And it is essentially proprietary flash cards,
memory cards in a way.
Yeah. There's a slot in the back of the system that you can plug these into, like the literal back of the system. And it's right there alongside the power port, the HDMI port, all that. Of course, some people were lambasting them for this because it's not as free as just saying like, hey, go buy whatever hard drive fits the minimum spec requirements for the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One, and just putting a hard drive in the system.
I will say what I do like about this, though, is that it is a very easy approach.
It is a very simple approach.
Yeah, you just take it out the package, you plug it in your system.
Now, I think that the upside to these NVMe these M2 things is going to be that they're very similar, actually. All you'd have to do is open it, and there's a bay there, and you just click it in.
No, you just click it in, you have to screw it down. But here's the thing, is that going to void my warranty?
It doesn't on the PlayStation 4, it doesn't on the PS3.
Okay, good.
So it shouldn't.
That's my big thing.
Yeah.
And they do say that there is going to be a list of suitable M.2 drives that will be supported for PS5.
Exactly.
So don't go out and buy any now, but you've already probably seen the thing, so you probably already know. But yeah.
So one of the things that is interesting about this to me is that Blake is a prime example of someone who's like, well, now it's a specific drive. It can't be everything. I like just a normal hard drive. And I would rather wait for the load speeds than get this. Now, one of the things that's going to happen on something like that is People don't think about it, but already not every hard drive is supported by the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One. Not every external drive is supported by the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One. You actually have to get one that's specifically specified to work with it. It has to be USB 3, has to be a certain gigabyte size. There's a lot of minimum requirements that come into this, and then how they work is based off of those minimum requirements too. You can get ones that are above the minimum requirement that'll do even better, which is cool. But people who think that the hard drives that were already going, you couldn't just get any hard drive and put it in a PlayStation 4. It still had to be a 2.5 inch. Still had to have certain gigabyte size. Still had to have all these different variables. Now, this is a little more complicated because it's something that's a little more outside of people's normal realm.
Yeah.
But so I'll give Microsoft's solution is a little easier, but it's also proprietary.
To be fair, that's also what they've been doing the past 3 gens, right? It's like they've always had that weird proprietary hard drive they sell, which
they were doing that
so far.
Did you know that on the Xbox 360 one that they actually came out with that you could eventually change the hard drive with the little tab one that was in a plastic shell? All that was
probably an encased SSD.
It was an encased
hard
HDD.
disk.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But it was really hard to take that thing apart and put another one in it.
Yeah.
They had their own little things. So it goes to show that Microsoft is no stranger to doing proprietary stuff with normal hardware.
And to the benefit of the doubt, people are saying like this is what killed Vita. This is not what killed Vita. The prices on these proprietary cards is what killed the Vita.
We don't know the prices on this yet, so we can't say.
And so far, Microsoft's track record has been pretty good about these things being well priced.
And I say this on both Sony and whenever you buy the things that are actually branded for them, it's ridiculous how much more they cost. If you buy an external drive that says it's for the PS4, it's like $30 more than the equivalent size.
But it goes that same thing for Xbox too.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Both of them have been bad at overpricing because it's made specifically for that. I think that
which is this. That doesn't mean anything.
Sony's choice here, I do think is the smarter of the two, but I don't think that you can quite write off Microsoft.
I think they're both incredibly smart choices.
I should say they're both smart in the way they work and ease of use. I think both of them are easy to use. Microsoft's is a little more easy to use. PlayStation's is a little more free in terms of free, but cost. I think on this, we can't write off Microsoft's decision until we understand what cost is. So until then, I was going to say props to Microsoft for having an easy-to-do option that does what they want it to do. Good. Sony's I like because it's a little more controlled. I get to go and say, hey, I want this particular brand with this particular thing. And as long as it hits minimum requirement spec that they give out, it's fine.
The only thing with Sony's is that I almost will guarantee it's going to be more expensive.
Well, why would it be more expensive?
M.2 drives are more expensive than SSDs by nature.
Well, I guess I should say
so unless the proprietary tax on that, Microsoft increases it by 20%, which is about roughly what an SSD is to an M.2.
Well, I would say, yeah, it's probably aiming for that because both of these are NVM drives.
I thought the memory card for Microsoft is SSD, is it not?
I mean, these are all SSDs.
Well, it's not an M.2 SSD though.
It's flash memory on expand, so it's no different than that. All that's going to happen now is the bandwidth that happens between the port. If the port's bandwidth bottlenecks, then you'll get a drop in speed from it. But otherwise, no, it's the same thing.
So, but the size of this is proprietary.
But it's easier.
It's this big. Yeah. An M.2 drive is about 4
they're
4
longer
inches
and thinner.
Yeah. So this is not a typical thing. So like that's what I'm saying is like the proprietariness of it is going to increase it to what you would pay for like that Samsung Evo I listed, which is $96.
Yeah, that's also Microsoft
coincidentally enough that same one right here,
that
they give in the article.
The thing is right. What I'm saying is that because of that form factor and change of the proprietariness, and that's exactly what's happening with the Vita memory card. It's no real different than an SSD. It's just in its own form factor and with its own encryption. That means that the Microsoft drive will be more expensive than
Sony decided to make a 60% markup on those. Where a 32 gigabyte costs $60.
No, I completely understand that, but that's also because they're being made to a specific form factor. So it costs them more to do it. We don't actually know what the markup was from Sony. We don't.
But the thing is, though, is that
and we don't know what Microsoft's markup's going to be.
Yeah, but Microsoft's hard drives have never costed 60% higher than a normal hard drive ever.
I'd have to look, man. I don't know.
I'm 100% sure. I'm 100% sure.
What I should go back to say on the 360, the original clip-on hard drives were very expensive.
No, yes, they're $40.
Dude, for a 12 gigabyte hard drive.
No.
Yes. Now, not later in the gen, before on the Elite. I'm talking about early when the system first launched. Do you remember when? Let's compare it to the first year of the 360, the first year of the PlayStation.
Are you talking about the original one?
Yeah,
I don't remember anything about the original.
Yeah, you don't remember the clip-on one that sat on top of the Xbox that had a clip-on. It was long and it was out. It stood outside
that is the
of the
original
system.
One.
Yeah, that's the original Xbox 360 hard drive.
Okay.
It was a clip-on drive.
Yeah.
And they were
20 gigabytes.
Yeah, well, there's 12 gigabyte, 20 gigabyte, and I think you go up to a 40 gigabyte.
I think the 12 gigabytes were $40.
Yeah, that was crazy priced for that time period. You could get a 20
Are you
gig hard drive.
insane in 2006?
Yes, you could get a 40 gig hard drive for $20.
You can't get a 40 gig hard drive back in 2010 for that price.
Yes, you could.
No, you couldn't.
Agree to disagree. Either way, don't want to go too far.
Actually, now I just realized I'm getting everything confused with terabytes.
I'm about to say, like, what are you talking about, dude?
No, see, I'm talking, and to be fair, what I'm talking about was the 360 Elite one that you were originally talking about that you inserted in the back.
No, that wasn't even the Elite. That was the S.
Oh, same thing. They're all stupid.
The Elite was still a clip-on hard drive from the outside. It was an external hard drive that clipped onto the top of the casing.
No, that's the same. That's the same as the first generation of their hard drive.
Yes, that was the same as the original 360 and the 360.
That one,
whatever arcade edition.
I remember that one was fairly priced because that was at the same time that I had to buy one of those. Was still the same time period. It wasn't the Vita, so it was PSP that had the Duo Stick 2s. And those were still kind of outrageous for what those were too.
Duo Stick 2s were really well priced, but that's because they also had a SanDisk version that you could buy that was supported by Sony.
That might be what I bought because I believe my Sony digital camera required that.
The SanDisk does not, and because more devices used it. That was also why it was cheaper.
Yeah.
The Vita memory card, no other device ever used it. There was two. The PSP had two different ones. They had the Memory Stick Pro Duo, which was used on some of their cameras, some of their camcorders, and the
that's
PSP.
the one that I had to buy.
Then the PSP Go had the M2 or whatever it was called that was supported by Sony's Ericsson phone line and the PSP Go.
That's a really small one, isn't it?
Super small.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never had that one, but I remember it.
Yeah. So anyway, with all that said, memory is at least expandable. And for anybody that doesn't know, it's 825 gigabytes. That sounds small, but one of the things that they talked about is that games have to duplicate items so much because of the original hard drive setup and to make the game stream well, that you'd see items and certain assets duplicated on the hard drive upwards of 400 times. So that increased game size hugely. If you can cut that down due to the SSD speeds, then that does mean that games are going to see a drastic reduction in size. Now, some of that reduction in size is going to go up due to 4K mod. Due to 4K resolution textures, if they ever go with true 4 ones, we don't know quite yet. But higher resolution textures are going to eat into some of that room. So it's hard to say exactly where this lands. Based off of what Sony's saying, the average person's games and how they handle things should work fine on this, given that all the variables together, and that most people will not be affected by this. But for the people that do want to do something more, they of course have the ability for expandable storage. So that's good to know. Last one up, I think that we can probably talk about realistically, is...
That should be all of it, shouldn't it?
There was one other thing I was wanting to talk about. I can't remember it.
Was it the fan? Or not the fan, but the...
yeah, it was going to be that the cooling solution was teased, but not fully talked about.
I don't want to talk about that because they threw up a really proprietary chart on there that nobody understood.
Well,
they had it looked like Horizon and then like God of War and stuff, and they were like, if God of War is using this amount, then... and it's this loud pushing its edges, then Horizon's using this amount or something.
Well, that was actually not in regards to the cooling. That was in regards to the chip and its variable clock speeds and how that would affect heating on a normal PS4 if they were to do it.
Oh yeah.
Now, one of the things you're talking about here is that the system is not going to have the same thing, and it's not going to regard off of ambient temperature in your room. So normally your system has to downclock whenever you're sitting and playing in a hot room. The system has to compensate for that.
It has to take in all ambient temperature.
Yeah, so
every chip does. I don't know. That's what I don't get is how this one's not supposedly.
Yeah. So right now they've not actually talked fully about the cooling system. They teased it here and there and talked about it loosely, but essentially Mark Cerny said they're going to save it for a teardown. So when they actually get somebody to get a console and tear it down and show you everything.
Unless there's like a protector on this.
So we're going to see, because what I should say is like the cooling for the One X is phenomenal. It's crazy, and it's in a really great form factor. So if they're doing something even remotely similar and something even better, that's cool.
Still takes
but right now we don't know.
If your room's still hot, that's going to contribute to your system being hot.
Yeah, but
and vice versa. Actually,
I should say the ambient temperatures comes down to the system's performance. The system won't have to scale down due to ambient temperatures.
Well,
what they're talking
that
about.
goes off of cooling then.
So that means the cooling should be adequate.
With the ambient temperature and compensate for that, which would make sense. But at the same time, we don't know much yet. So we hope that it's getting something like a vapor cooling chamber, liquid cooling, quote unquote.
Yeah, I mean technically it is.
I still don't like that term when it comes like closed loop systems. And like PCs, because it is liquid cooling, but it's not like what you think it is. There's not a water reservoir with water that's constantly cycling in and out.
Yeah.
It's only little bits going to and from.
Yeah. It's real interesting because there's phones that have vapor cooling, and they call them liquid cooling.
That stupid Asus phone.
But if you cut them, it's weird. If you take the phone apart and you take the battery out and you move it, and you see that little channel. If you cut it, water comes out.
Yeah, and all it is water running through a channel constantly that's carrying heat and dissipating heat.
Yeah, it's amazing and it's interesting, but it just doesn't. That's why I prefer to call it vapor cooling instead of liquid cooling. Technically, it's liquid, but it's liquid that's becoming vaporized and staying vaporized the whole time.
Yeah, and that is something too.
But it can't leave because it's within copper, so it moves.
It
doesn't
have to be within copper either. It could be like a closed tube system, like you find on the cheaper AIO coolers for PCs.
Sure,
it could just be in rubber.
A lot of them use copper though, because copper is a great.
Well, they use a copper block, but they don't use copper tubes.
Well, okay, the one in the phone I'm talking about,
they use copper tubes.
It's a copper. It's a flat thing, so it's only probably about a millimeter or two thick, but it's pretty wide, and it goes up the whole thing of the phone. It's interesting.
I guess that makes sense for small designs like that you can actually just carve a little tube out and then place one in.
Mm-hmm. And copper is also very malleable, so you can make that weird shape.
Yeah, and that wouldn't. I mean, I've seen people make copper tubing for like gaming PCs and stuff. That's so stupidly priced.
And an enclosed device, you wouldn't want to use rubber because rubber will get hot.
Yeah, that's true.
And but either way. I have a feeling that this is going to be a weird episode for a lot of people because of the fact that if you're not a tech head, this was a really weird show. I really think that there's plenty of ways that Sony can improve on this throughout the year and show more. I think when they decide to show games, they're going to talk about some of these things again and show them in real time, in action, and that will be the way that a lot of this stuff makes more sense to you. They'll have real-time demos that you can see and clearly make sense for you. So we're gonna and for me, I didn't understand all this. I probably understood about 50 to 60% of this, and the other parts of it were kind of going over my head. So it goes to show that this was really set and focused at one group of people, and it could kind of work for some, like me and Saul, but others are going to be more confused than anything. Blake, one of our friends, and he was doing the watch along. We were talking on our Discord, and he mentioned that he about 80% of it went over his head. So it goes to show you that this was not a good show for the normal folk who are not as into tech, but I think we'll get one of those soon. So I guess my community's take will be something a little more broad. When do you hope to see, or when do you expect to see more information about the PlayStation 5? When do you think the next event is going to be? The next, whatever it is, be it a video or an actual event, depending on how COVID works out. When do you expect to see something else in relation to PlayStation 5 in a bigger dump format like this?
I'm calling it. We'll get a state of play in May.
State of play in May?
That has to be soon if the console's still coming out this year.
Microsoft have confirmed that theirs is still coming out in holiday 2020.
Yeah, it got weird because like they eventually, or like on the website said Thanksgiving, but then they're like, that's an error. Don't listen to that. It's holiday.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, is it really still holiday, or like was it originally Thanksgiving? Now it got pushed back even further.
Hard to say. I mean, they both released in December on the last generation, so
yeah,
maybe that'll happen again. But anyway, I have a feeling that there's going to be people who don't really care for this episode. I don't think we did as good of a job as I would have hoped in trying to wrangle this stuff together. I can only hope that it made sense and that you enjoyed the episode. But of course, next week we'll go to something a little more lighthearted and different. So yeah, when do you expect to see more about the PS5? And I'm going to go a little bit further. What would you like the next thing we see to be focused around?
Console reveal with a controller.
So yeah, whatever it is, the one big thing, if maybe you want to deeper dive into what backwards compatibility is going to be and how it works, if you want to just see the console and the controller, do you want to see the games coming forward or what?
How would you feel if the console that we get is the console, the dev kit?
Oh, boy. Ooh. We'll see.
Hide that one behind my TV.
I don't really mind. I know it sounds weird, but I like it more than the Series X. Maybe because it just has more personality. I'm not saying it's pretty by any standpoint.
No. It looks like a foot bath.
I like the pizza warmer idea still.
That works too, but the Series X looks like that could be like a little cool mini stealth PC.
It just looks like a refrigerator, and I'm not even.
It doesn't look like a refrigerator.
It looks like a weird mini fridge. Now, not in terms of size,
for like
but
a single
design.
Coca-Cola.
Hold on, yeah, exactly. It's plain. And this is not a hit to Xbox. All I'm saying is, I even like sometimes when it's something that's kind of goofy looking. I like it when something's got a little more personality to it than that.
Yeah. I just like minimal stuff
That
like that.
looks like that's made to be hidden. That looks like that's made to just go, hey, it's just over there, and we don't want anybody to really ever see it.
There's like household speakers that look like that, like Google speakers and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's meant to blend in the environment. I kind of like something that stands out a little more.
I just don't think that thing would fit on my table if it was the dev kit version.
I don't know why not.
I'd have to put it in front of my TV or move my TV around, and I'll make a custom out and drill it and hide it up under the desk or something.
All right. Either way, we're going to let Saul get out of here and go ahead and wrap this thing up. You can find us on Twitter and take part in our little community stake section, and you can do that at Triangle SQRD. You can find us on Facebook in the Facebook group Triangle Squared, a PlayStation Podcast. You can find us in our day-to-day, moment-to-moment lives, along with many other people in the community, over in our Discord, which we always have linked in the descriptions below. If you're listening to the show, you can always listen, of course. You can watch it on YouTube and subscribe to us over there if you like what we're doing. It also helps if you give the videos likes. Of course, it helps people find us and play into YouTube's algorithm. But if you're listening on something like iTunes or an aggregate podcast thing that lets you give reviews are very much appreciated. It lets us know what you like about the show. It lets other people know what you do and don't like about the show and whether our show is worth their time. So to close these things off, lastly, you can support us in the show and our other shows, like our recently released midweek matinee podcast that we're doing, that I'm doing alongside some other people. Saul's not part of that one.
Nope.
We do a movie per week and talk about it in depth. If you want to check that out, it's up live now for everybody. Patrons get it a week early, so patrons are already able to listen to the second episode, while everybody else just had the ability to listen to the first episode on everything else. So we appreciate you guys, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks to our patrons, Josh Jarrell, Matthew Green, my name is Dan, Luke Bartolomeo, Sean Santarud, Funk Turkey, Danny Villalobos, Corey Hickerson, Blake Popst, Shadowist, Steven Salazar, The Stonard, Travis Below, Eduardo Palomino, Stefan Swanlin, Constantly Kenny, Solitary Red, Brian, Donovan Williams, William Digital Spooker, Derek Porter, Josh Ayers, Brandon Edwards, Sean One Neo, and Tyler Powers. If you would like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Nartech. Thank you.